Go ahead and call at 7:02 the David Douglas School Board regular meeting on September 12th, 7 o'clock. Is that all? That's all. I'm new to this. Okay, great. I'm going to start it off with the Native American land acknowledgement. Today I would like to acknowledge the people whose land we are gathered on. Present-day Portland is located on the traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tuwalton, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. Let us also acknowledge the robust Native community made up of tribal diversity that originates from around the country and whose journeys have brought them to Portland by ways of forced displacement or seeking opportunities. Today, these same communities celebrate their heritage, showing resilience and tenacity that would be greatly admired by their ancestors. Next, we have the student body president's report. Thank you so much for joining. Take it away.
Hi, it's amazing to see all you guys. I'm Jared Ketz, if you don't know. Yeah, it's my senior year. It's crazy. President of the school, which just means that I have a huge commitment to my school. Of course, that doesn't mean like any hierarchy or anything. If anything, I would be at the bottom, of course, as we all servant leaders are. And so, cool updates from school. It's cool being back. School's buzzing again. Good community. Right now, tomorrow, you can join us, actually. I'd love to see all your faces at our assembly, our homecoming assembly, our welcome back assembly. And at that assembly, we're going to announce our theme for homecoming. So if you want to find out what that is, you can pop on by, and we'd love to have you. And so that's one of the main events that's going on right now. Another thing is people have already started coming up to student council or me about stuff that they're maybe passionate about for the year. And one thing and feedback that I've gotten from students that I'd just like to share with you guys is that some students have recognized that there's a lot of amazing opportunities at Douglas, and there's a lot of resources at Douglas, but sometimes students don't hear about everything, so there's room for improvement in communication to students or between students about communicating those resources and opportunities and deadlines and all those type of things. And so that's one thing. But yeah, that's just a little piece for me. It's nice to see you guys.
Thank you, Jared, so much. We're really excited to see you back here. And particularly, I'm really interested in continuing to hear some of these things that you're bringing from your other peers or you as you listen into what we're talking about here. As always, you're absolutely more than welcome to stay for the rest of the agenda, but also recognize your busy year as a senior and your evening, so you're welcome to leave at any time as well, too.
And I just wanted to piggyback on the assembly tomorrow because Mr. Byer also wanted me to extend an invite to everyone, and I believe the assembly starts officially at 9:19. I see Linda Vansel, our assistant principal, out there. Yeah, but we'll say at 9 o'clock. So if anyone's interested and available, it's a great experience, and about 9 o'clock tomorrow, I know a lot of cabinet's going to be there as well, and hopefully see you there, Jared, and thank you for your leadership.
Yeah, I'm going to be emceeing, actually, with Kim Trong.
All right, next we have attendee input. All right, looks like we have one person signed up, Alejandra Gallegos. Hello, welcome.
It's just a little smaller. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Alejandra Gallegos Chacon, but I go by Alejandra. I'm here today representing, I'm the youth community organizer for the Youth Environmental Justice Alliance. We're actually based with Opal Environmental Justice Oregon. I'd like to start off by saying, Jared, congratulations on being president. That's no easy feat. I was student body president at the U of O. So it is a big commitment, and I hope you uplift your students' voices. What I'm here to talk to you today about is just kind of introduce myself, let you all know that I'll be popping in here. I work very closely with this youth group. We're a youth leadership program that takes place after school. We have internships, which I actually have 5 interns from David Douglas High School, and I would just love to highlight the talent that you all bring. They are truly amazing, some of the most intellectual, inspirational students I have ever met, and they make my work worthwhile. So you should be very proud of the students you have here. We also are working on Youth Pass, the implementation of Youth Pass. I'm working very closely with Rolando Flores, Vice Principal David Douglas, and just some of the things I want to highlight for you all, not to like worry you or anything, but we are like struggling a wee bit with the implementation of Youth Pass. As it is a new program, it's a new source of funding and resources for students. It is a little harder to get it fully functional in the school. So right now I don't think we have a sufficient funding, as it is only being served for seniors only, and seniors that are qualified for free and reduced lunch as well. And so you might like question, well, what's wrong with that? Those are the people who probably need it most and have work to go to. Well, the truth is as Jared mentioned, there's a lot of after school activities, right? There's extracurriculars, there's games. A lot of these students work. A lot of these students want to be in internship programs. They need to get to school or to practice or even like doctor's appointments. So when thinking about how do we make sure we have like the best possible chance at student success, we need to think about basic necessities like transportation. So currently, your school operates a very high population with low income needs, and transportation is like one of the main things that helps alleviate poverty. So I'm working with them to make sure that we can get the most students signed up currently, but I will also be here for the next grant cycle process to be helping you all get into that pool of funds with TriMet, and to make sure that we can expand that. But I do want you all to recognize that having it only open to seniors who are on free and reduced lunch isn't the most accessible, and it's actually really still difficult for them to sign up as there is no major advertisements. So not to stress you all out, I'm going to be working hand in hand doing traditional outreach and education around it, but it is something for you all to take back. So yes, that is what I'm here, and I'll be popping around. So thank you very much, and I hope you all have a lovely evening.
Thanks, Alejandra. So we're going to move a couple of things around and add a couple of things. First, if there are no objections, I'm going to add a couple of agenda items, one around other business, and then another one around a purchase sale agreement. Great. And so it looks like we do have John from BPS here. So hello, how are you? Good. So you are here early, and some of our other folks for our item prior are not quite here yet. So if you are okay with being in the hot seat a little early, we're going to switch you if possible now. So we have an update from BPS that we wanted to make sure we were sharing with you all. This is John Cole. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I don't know how this board conducts business. As a bureaucrat, I have some handouts.
That's fine.
I only have 10.
You can pass them around.
But you're welcome to have them. And I don't encourage you to look at them this evening, but they'll have in a little more detail some of the information I hope to cover with you in about 10 minutes. And then will make myself available for questions. Again, my name is John Cole. I work for the City of Portland's Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I know that there are recommendations in our comprehensive plan and certain state statutes that encourage us to communicate with school boards within the city, and we've done that at a staff level fairly regularly with the superintendent and with Pat over the months. But there are a couple of projects that I guess have risen a little bit to the point where we thought that perhaps they might be of some interest to the board. Our office has been working on a package of housing-related initiatives over the last couple of years, really, that can be broken down into three components. There's an effort to look at the multifamily zoning district regulations in the city of Portland that falls under the name of Better Housing by Design. There's a project to look at how we treat residential, single-family residential zoning in the city that has generated a certain amount of controversy, if you will, that we refer to as the residential infill project. And there's a third component that has come into being a little bit later, that is an anti-displacement action plan. And so I just briefly will go through those three components, and then we'll open the floor to questions. But the Better Housing by Design project is looking at the city's multifamily zoning district regulations and trying to provide more opportunities for the development community and to try to improve the environment of families that are living in the city's multifamily zoned neighborhoods. And there are a number of families within your board, your school district area that new residents may benefit from this particular project. There's a handout that goes to that point in a little more details, but we are trying to expand the diversity of housing options that are available and provide incentives for the developers to provide more green space, more play areas for families, and more family-friendly units. In East Portland in particular, we're also coordinating with the Bureau of Transportation to try to encourage more pedestrian walkways and more mid-block connections. It's our observation, our belief that when you're in East Portland, not just David Douglas, but all of East Portland, that there's a number of locations where the street block structure makes it harder for people to go north or south than we'd prefer. So we're trying to incorporate some incentives to allow for more traffic interaction. In the residential infill project, our efforts at looking at single-family zoning district regulations, again, we're trying to add more housing options within single-family zones, but only if they meet certain size limits and design requirements. And this is controversial a little bit because we're essentially allowing for duplexes, for triplexes, and in some circumstances for fourplex development in areas that previously have been reserved for a single-family home on a single-family lot. And this creates a certain anxiety among some members of the community, but we have included some size limits for those new structures so that they'll fit into the neighborhood, and some design requirements to get at some of those same concerns. And there's a fair amount of these neighborhoods in the David Douglas School District that this would apply to. So maybe the item of most interest perhaps to the school district as an institution is a question as, well, do we anticipate that these changes in our zoning regulations are going to have an impact on the number of families that are moving into the David Douglas School District? And this might have been a larger concern a number of years ago, but we know that these set up long-term changes in the numbers of folks moving to the city of Portland, and that, of course, is of interest to this body. And I'm not a demographer, so some of this is a little above my head. So if you have specific questions on this, I'll probably ask to take them as a homework assignment. But even though these two projects that I've referred to are opening up the amount of development that can occur on properties within the David Douglas School District, we're doing the same thing citywide. And if we sort of plug in our new zoning allowances into the models that we use to project where will our new population move to within the city boundaries, it's our belief that there will be a minimum change in the expected new population moving within the David Douglas School District between now and 2035 than there would have been if we had not made these particular changes. A lot of the development pressure, we think, that these actions are intended to accommodate will allow people to develop all over the city of Portland and not just David Douglas. So we still expect, as a number that's been in some of our formal policy documents, that between now and 2035, there'll be 9,500 new dwelling units expected within the David Douglas School District. So I think that the message there is it's sort of the same projections as we've made in the past. And the final component that I want to mention to you is one that's I think it's come a little bit later to the effort. But when we were developing these zoning regulations and presenting them to our planning commission and taking public input, we heard from both our planning commissioners and from members of the community that they were worried about what sort of displacement these sorts of policies would encourage, if you will, or what the impact would be as kind of an unexpected consequence. And we, at a staff level, we don't think we have the answers we want at this particular point in time. So our office, our director, Andrea Durbin, and then Joe Zender, the chief planner in our office, have started up an anti-displacement action plan that is just now really getting started in earnest and is scheduled to report to the City Council in March. But this effort will develop again as a good bureaucrat does. We're going to try to gather a community task force to help us with this and bring some new voices to the table and explore additional programs and actions that we can do as a city to try to avoid displacing more families and some of our previous investments and official actions have caused in the past. So whether or not it's deeper affordability bonuses for developers to provide affordable housing, whether it's gap funding for existing residents to help purchase their own homes, or additional tenant protections. These are questions that we hope to explore between now and March to make sure that the efforts we think we're doing to improve the environments in our residential neighborhoods don't have a negative impact on people that we don't intend. So Better Housing by Design is headed to City Council for workshops and potential adoption here in the coming month of October. The residential infill project will start appearing in front of council in December for work sessions and hearings. And as I had mentioned, the anti-displacement action plan is scheduled to report to City Council in March of 2020. I've covered a lot of material fairly briefly. I've provided a handout that goes into these projects in a little more detail where I have them, and I'll be happy to answer any questions this evening that you might have, and if I don't have an answer, then I promise to get back and communicate with Superintendent Richardson and through him to answer questions you might have.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy week to be here with us. Does anyone have any? Rita, go ahead.
I said co-chair housing for East Portland Action Plan, and I have to tell you, our last meeting we had quite a discussion on your Better Housing by Design, and we're working up testimony actually in support of it. But there was a question that there was a kind of a conflict. One person said yes, it was doing this, and another person said no, it wasn't. Is they talked about changing. Right now, affordable housing developers have to put playground and green space when they build their multifamily for the children, and private developers don't. And there was talk that they were going to include this requirement in private development of multifamily. And one of our members said in the code that isn't defined. We've seen it in publications and people talking about it. Is it going to be required or is it not?
It is going to be required, and a little more information, a little elaboration on that point is in your Better Housing by Design handout on the the fifth page in under outdoor spaces and green elements. So we're aware that many developments that have occurred, not just in East Portland, but across the city in our multifamily zones, that they fill up a lot of their non-building footprint area on a site with a parking lot, and increasingly families are living in multifamily complexes, and kids are playing in the parking lot. So we are taking steps, and we are requiring residential outdoor areas in high-density zones, and they can be on the ground level if the buildings are large enough. They might be on a rooftop. I'm not sure if that's going to happen in the David Douglas School District or not, but for the specific numbers or the citations, board member, I'll pass that on so that you could track that down.
Okay, because the concern was that was what was being said, but the code gave them options out. I'm just repeating what someone said who gets into the code stuff. But I'd like to go on to anti-displacement. You're just starting your action plan. We spent quite a bit of time at our last meeting on Monday discussing the lack of effort in anti-displacement efforts in East County or East Portland. In fact, we can tell from our enrollment our families are being displaced and have been for the last 4 years. So the city is way behind. East Portland Action Plan came out with their anti-displacement tools 5 years ago, seeing this was going to happen. We're really concerned that the city's going to take too much time planning, and by the time they take action, they're already going to be displaced. In fact, our housing committee is going to come up with, no one's even defined displacement. And we're going to define displacement in East Portland, as well as work up strategies to recommend to City Council as well to get the ball moving a little faster. Just giving you a heads up.
And I appreciate it. And I don't disagree with you that
Yeah.
the city's been a little asleep at the wheel in this regard. I do think there's a greater energy, and some of this is taking a place above my pay grade, but I do see a greater energy and interest in addressing this, and I think people are aware that timing is important, that we don't have a lot of time to
Okay.
do our thing with it.
And a question, just one question on residential infill, because now originally it was duplexes, ADUs, and triplexes, and they increased it to fourplexes. Example, if two lots were merged together and they subdivided them into, say, 5,000 each because they were bigger lots, could each lot put one fourplex on it, even though it was in a single family surrounded by one-story homes? I actually have a piece of property right close to me that the residents are very concerned about that happening. So, and you can get back to me on that if you like.
I think my answer, and I want to put a little bit of a caveat on it, I think that the answer might be yes, but the size of the unit that's going on that 5,000 square foot lot will be getting so small, the size of the building that's permitted, because there is a
Right, size limit, I understand that.
limit on the size of the building more than the number of units. I think it might become impractical for that to be developed as a fourplex.
And would they also take in consideration transportation, the street structure, and whether it could handle it? This particular property feeds into Lincoln Park, where there's already no parking. It's very tight through there. And so I was just curious, are they going to look at something than just the lot? Because it seems like if they're going to put triplexes or fourplexes in single family, they should be looking at the street structure and whether it can handle that many additional, because people, they tend to give them one parking space and then they want to park on the street, that kind of thing. So just a curiosity if that's going to be included when they start reviewing those permits and stuff. So
Allow me to, let me take that and give you a complete answer as a homework assignment, if I may.
No, that's fine. I'm throwing these at you, and I don't expect an answer tonight, but I feel they're important issues, especially the one by Lincoln Park, where there's potential where something like that could happen with this new infill, that it could cause a real traffic problem on that street. And so that's why I'm hoping when they allow and permit for things they take into consideration, no matter where it's at in the city, that there is places for people to park and they can get in and out, and it doesn't cause the major traffic jam in a very residential street. Okay.
You had a question?
Yeah, a couple. Well, one is a comment with the anti-displacement task force, just to ensure that you include those organizations that are representing the most directly impacted communities in a real meaningful way, not just to check a box that you did so, and particularly in engaging East Portland folks in that conversation. But, with the residential infill project, let me tell you a really brief story. I lived in North Portland for the first 12 years of my marriage, and we were renters, and we're in East Portland today because our rent became completely unaffordable. And at that time, my husband and I, this was about 5 years ago, decided to look into owning a home. Our incomes had gone up significantly because we started a nonprofit and we didn't have a lot of money. And so we ended up buying a house 5 years ago that we absolutely could not afford today in just 5 years in East Portland. And I have a concern that these infill development projects will benefit people like me who were able to buy a property here. I could easily turn my basement into, turn my property into a duplex and offer rent, right, to people who need it. But my concern is who's owning these units. Has there been any consideration given to incentivizing small condo developments as a triplex, or for folks to have homeowners associations, so that folks can actually purchase something? Because as we know, rent is just an endless cycle of paying for someone else's mortgage, right? And if we want to encourage economic development in East Portland or elsewhere, folks need to be given the opportunity to own something. So that's my concern, is that it will change the market, continue gentrification, and folks like me, who got in 5 years ago, will benefit significantly. People who need homes will benefit, surely, because they need a place to live. But who owns those places is of great concern. Any other? Go ahead.
So I was just looking over the residential infill project summary. It looks like a lot of the changes to zoning are happening right across from Ventura Park Elementary, 122nd and Stark. Is that where a lot of the big changes are going to be? If I'm reading this wrong on page 5. Or,
the changes in the summary. There's kind of a map in the fold out, and the areas that are shown there in yellow would all be subject to the options for the additional housing types. So you can see it's spread out across the city, along the east side in particular.
I guess I was looking at page 7 in the. Sorry.
The page 7 is a little bit of a detail that I didn't cover, but in response to your question, that the areas in this map on page 7 in the orange are areas that historically have been platted as a 2,500 square foot lot, but the way that they've sort of been bought and developed over the years, people have tended to put two of those together to equal a 5,000 square foot lot. And what these proposed changes are suggesting is that the city is going to honor those original lot lines, those original lots that are 2,500 square feet each, and allow people to develop them independently. In the past, we would have required that they be paired up before a person could develop those in an R5 zone.
The purple zone? I'm just curious.
The purple zones are, well, let me take that as a homework assignment as well. Those are areas that I think we're trying to reintroduce historic R2.5 zoning that hasn't been on the city's work list until this project recommended that.
Okay, thank you.
And I should comment that I'm here giving this presentation because of my relationship with the school board, not as an expert on these programs. There's a Bill Cunningham who's leading the Better Housing by Design, and a Morgan Tracy who's leading the residential infill project, and they would be able to answer your questions, and I apologize for taking them as homework.
Oh no, I'm just wondering about kind of the future of Ventura and whether that, if we're going to be seeing more families or less families in the future. Thank you very much.
And to respond to the earlier comment, just quickly, that you raise a good point, and the ownership tools that might be made available to families is squarely in the anti-displacement work program.
Anyone else have any comments, questions? I'll just second some of the comments that some of my colleagues said, and continue to think of David Douglas as an active participant in some of those task force conversations around anti-displacement, or just in general, a body that is directly impacted by a lot of the displacement that's currently happening within Portland. One of the reasons why we wanted to make sure we were bringing this to you all is because like John had mentioned, this is something that's going to be going before City Council in the next few months, and so we would love to continue to be talking with you all as a collective about not only what this means for our district, but then ultimately what position we end up taking on this potential significant planning and zoning change, and if we did decide to take a position, how we wanted to craft that. So we wanted to make sure before those conversations started that we had an expert from the Bureau to come and share, give us a little briefing. This is the first part of that. I think, it's an ongoing conversation. Frida is, I think, more of an expert than anyone here, I think, and has been doing it for a long time. So thank you again, John. I don't know if you had any other comments, Ken.
I don't. I just want to thank John. Ultimately, he reached out to us, so we just appreciate that flag and continued communication, and open up to the board. If any questions come up after this presentation or anything you're interested, please don't hesitate. I know to email directly to John, but if you flow through me, I'll be happy to get the information to John, and I know John will be getting back to me with a few questions here, and we'll make sure to follow up. So thank you for your time. It's really appreciated.
All right. I hope you guys are all having a good school year. It's always fun.
Okay, so moving on. I'm really excited. So going back up to the prior item, the proclamation for the National Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month. I am really, really excited to be bringing this item back, the second annual Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month proclamation that David Douglas has, will be proclaiming. This is the first in our series of Heritage Month proclamations that we will be celebrating and sharing at our board meetings this year. So I'm particularly excited about kicking off this school year with this one. And I have to say that there has been an incredible amount of engagement this year for this proclamation, much more than last year, from students, from staff, from parents, and from community folks. And so I think it's just a testament, to be quite honest, of how ready people are for us to be talking about this in this space, and to be acknowledging and recognizing and celebrating the various heritages within the Latinx community, but also the reasons why it's important to acknowledge that. So I'm particularly excited about that. I think we have a great representation of that here in the room. Thank you so much for being here. So as always, I'm going to start off sharing a few remarks, particularly data points that I found particularly interesting and alarming, not alarming, but worth noting in the proclamation. And then we have a set of, I would say, about 2, maybe 3 different panels from the looks of how many people showed up. We usually give about 2 to 3 minutes for folks, but I am going to try to ask maybe about 2 minutes for people this evening. And then I do know we have some folks who need interpretation, and we'll definitely make room for interpretation to occur so that folks are given an equitable amount of time. And then we will have, go ahead and read the proclamation, and then Ken will close it out. So just a few of the things that I wanted to mention. Growth of the Latinx community, particularly the student body here in David Douglas, is significant. We have 26.58% of our student body, or 2,690 students who are currently enrolled who have self-identified as Hispanic or Latinx. And again, the striking percentage is 918% over the past 23 years. So it's an incredible amount of growth. As we heard in the previous presentation, that our district has changed, and it's changed significantly over a short period of time. The other thing that I wanted to call out is the incredible achievements of our self-identified Latinx female students, who had 85 0.7% graduation rate this past year. I'll also note that our male self-identified Latinx male students graduated at a 69.2%, both of which are above the statewide average of 68% and the overall student cohort of David Douglas at 77.26. So still a lot of progress, certainly not enough for me, not enough for a lot of people. I think we'll continue to keep moving the dial up there. A couple of other pieces. One thing that I'm particularly interested in, as a person of color sitting on an elected body is who we have in leadership positions. I did want to note that we don't yet have any Latinx identifying folks in our union leadership, and I would love to encourage and have conversations and work with our union and our staff to see how we can move the dial there and make sure that we have adequate representation there in the future. And then I also wanted to call out, as I really look at, raising my daughter here and having gone through public school myself, the amount of data that we're seeing around bullying and increased discrimination and concerns around hate crimes and violence towards the Latinx and multiple other communities of color. 68% of Hispanic and Latinx students in the high school were bullied last year. Who were bullied said that it was due to their race or their skin color, and 62% said it was because of where their family is from. And so again, when we think about what it means for us to be celebrating, to be talking about this here in the board meeting, it has a huge ripple effect throughout the district and for our students, particularly when we're hearing them report these experiences that they are having in our schools right now. And so some of the things that I'm doing, some of the things that we're doing at the board level is really looking at our disciplinary practices, really looking at safety in our schools and other policies that we can really move forward around discipline and safety. We're really working with our equity committee and staff on recruitment and what really that does look like for representation among our body. And then one of the exciting things that I'm really looking forward to this year is not only our strategic planning process, but also the engagement process for our Student Success Act, which was recently passed, and I'm really excited about that, and a particular fund for the Latinx community that was earmarked $1 million specifically for Latinx students across the state. So I'm very excited to be working on that. Know that that's something that I'm holding in the back of my head in the work that we're doing this year and in years to come. So there's a lot, but that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start calling up some of our folks, and I think I want to call some folks up in panels, so multiple folks at once, if that's okay. And the first set of folks I have are some community partners from Latino Network. I don't know if you all are here, but I hope you are. So I have Lorena Mosqueda, who is manager of youth education and wellness programs at Latino Network. Is Lorena here? Great. Awesome. And then she was going to be joined by Cecilia Hernandez, who is Cecilia here? Awesome. Great. And Cecilia is going to be joined by an interpreter, Aide. Great. You are all here. Fantastic. So like I said, we usually have about 2 to 3 minutes, but feel free to, keep it to 2 if possible. If 3, that's okay. And whichever one of you want to go, can go.
Got it? Good evening, David Douglas School Board Chairs and Directors. My name is Lorena Mosqueda. I'm the Education and Wellness Program Manager for Latino Network, where we work with both students and parents to positively transform the lives of Latinx youth, families, and communities. I want to express my sincere appreciation for this proclamation celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. In this day and age, we recognize that our youth, especially our Latinx students, are bombarded by the messages that are harmful to their success in schools. Latinx students experience stress and anxiety at increased rates, exacerbated by the increased racism and negative rhetoric towards immigrants. Our programs aim to counteract this by supporting youth towards academic success and social-emotional well-being through culturally specific and trauma-informed practices. As an example of our work, I will now share a success story from an Escalera instructor. This student joined Escalera in March. When I first started working with him, he was not on track to graduate. His grades were very low and attendance was a big issue. As he began to attend our program and receive one-on-one case management and support, I started to see an improvement in his grades and attendance. Shortly after, with the support of the Escalera team, the student, family, and counselors came together to develop a monthly plan to improve class performance. Grades and grades and attendance. This student became more engaged in classes and his study habits started to improve. By the end of May, he had turned in all of his missing assignments, his grades improved, and he was on track to graduate. As a result of the support he received, he was able to graduate on time and walk across the stage, making him the first in his family to graduate high school. We are proud to report that he is currently preparing for his first term in college. This proclamation is a statement of the David Douglas School Board's values and most importantly, a reminder of the work that we must continue to do in order to close racial disparities in our education system. I appreciate that the school board is committed to culturally specific strategies so that every student can succeed. We look forward to working with you in the future as we continue to address the issues that impact our Latinx youth and their ability to achieve equitable outcomes like the student I just shared. Thank you.
Mi nombre es Cecilia Hernández. Mi experiencia de ser latina es primero la barrera del idioma.
Good evening. My name is Cecilia Hernandez, and the experience is as a Latino. One of the first barriers is the language barrier.
Pero mi experiencia ha sido muy buena. A las personas que he conocido me han hecho sentir bienvenida.
But her experience has been great. The people that she has met had made this possible.
Y me gusta involucrarme con todo y que no entiendo y hablo mucho inglés, pero me doy cuenta que es un cambio que se necesita hacer por nuestros jóvenes y yo lo veo en el éxito que están teniendo mis hijos en la escuela.
She likes to be very involved, even though that, she doesn't speak the language. However, this, she's noticed that, the experience that she has received here at David Douglas has been very grateful, especially with her kids.
Y sigo haciendo lo que puedo, ayudando a la consejera de aquí que habla español, porque quiero ver el cambio y quiero haber muchos más latinos involucrados para que sea mejor para todos.
She's saying that again, she's very involved and she's helping the counselor at David Douglas High School, to get continue this progress and making sure that we have more involvement of Latinos, within the school and in leadership positions.
Muchas gracias por su tiempo.
Thank you very much for your time.
Muchas gracias. So the next set of folks are Sabrina Sommer and some students. And I think, Jared, I had you on the list as well. You're more than welcome to share remarks, but you don't have to. So come on up. Do it.
Good evening. My name is Sabrina. I am a high school counselor, and boy, it's really cool to be here and hear what you guys are talking about, and to celebrate this proclamation with you it's exciting to have folks specifically recognize the contributions of a particular community, and I know that we will be doing this with other communities as well. At David Douglas, we always talk about how diversity is our greatest strength, and what I find is that diversity is our greatest strength when we recognize and notice the difference and learn from it and engage it. And that is what helps our diversity be strong. And we know we're in a cultural moment that is a little challenging in terms of diversity and how we are handling it as a nation. And so it's important to have moments where we sit and just have that reflection and are able to recognize the value that other folks are bringing. I'm a Latin American immigrant, and so I've been privileged to spend a lot of time engaging in relationships with our students and with our parents through the parent nights and the Latino Student Union. And so I know the challenge of straddling the different worlds that our students face with the language barrier and the home life that is a very different cultural vibe, and the expectations and values there versus school life, which is, you know, the new country and the new language and the new set of values and expectations and all the confusion therein. I've lived it. I know our students live it every day as well. And so I want to stop talking because you need to hear from them. I mean, you need to hear from the parents and the students, so I'd like to give them an opportunity to share a little with you.
Hi, thanks for giving me the opportunity to be here. My name is Alma Romero, and I have 3 daughters, one in Cherry Park and 2 here in David Douglas. Here, just maybe to speak a little bit on behalf of Latino parents. So thank you so much, because since my daughter started school, I only have just a good experience with very, very supportive staff and teachers. And even when there is no too much participation of the Latino parents in the meetings sometimes, but I can tell that it's not because we don't care about the kids. We really care about our kids. We really care about their education, their safety, and their development in general. But sometimes there are barriers, like language, to mention some that, yeah. But we are so glad, personally so glad to be part of this community in David Douglas, as I said, because they're just good people here. And thank you, all of you. Hopefully we can work together in this year that just started, this school year, and, well, be part of the changes that we may have here in CURB. Thank you so much.
Okay, my name is Norland, and I'm here to know what it's like to be Latino and the opportunity what we have here when we are immigrants. So, yeah, I mean,
how is it for you?
I mean, I never been this like kind of experienced like to learn a new language and be in a new country, you know, meet new peoples and, you know, rules and stuff, you know. Like things like you're gonna think the first time when you came to the new country, you're gonna say, oh no, I mean I can adapt to that rules and I mean how the people gonna treat you, and I mean like all that kind of stuff is like being in your mind, like the negative things, like you say, oh, maybe in the school they don't want me because I'm Latino and I don't speak English, and I'm an immigrant, and you know, that kind of stuff. And I mean, I never been in that kind of experience, and I'm here in the United States like for 2 years, and now like when I started to learn the English, it was like crazy for me to know a new language and to meet friends, you know, that kind of things. Like they don't like they don't treat you bad because you're Latino. they just like, I mean, oh, you're Latino, okay, teach me how to speak Spanish, or I want to learn Spanish, because like the Latinos are beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just like, learn new things. So that's why we came here, and to have a good future, to graduate, be a person in the future too, have it work, and help your family. Yeah. Thanks for listening. So
2 years, pretty good English, right?
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we had a few other folks, but I just want to stop and see if there are any other students who wanted to give any testimony. Okay.
Hi. First of all, thanks. It's cool to see you guys. Excited for when LSU starts up again. I'm really happy that we have this proclamation in second year. I think I take a lot of pride in my community. One thing I've noticed is like just the term like Latinx or whatever, the term Latinx is very powerful in uniting a community. But sometimes there's a misconception in like people who are not familiar with the community that this just means like people from Mexico or something like that. I think it's really important about like the month, how to like keep in mind, myself to keep in mind, to explore the many distinct cultures and languages and traditions and achievements and foods that like coincide like in that term. Like for example, I'm Mayan or Maya. So my dad so my roots are indigenous to southern Mexico, and so I'm learning more of my language and having more of a pride in my culture as well. And so I'm very happy about this.
Thanks, Jared. All right, so we have a few other folks. Let's see. Kelly Burkhart, principal at Menlo Park Elementary School, and Laura Chapman, a language development specialist, also at Menlo Park Elementary. And then we have a couple other folks, I think, after this, before we read the proclamation. Thank you all so much for being here and for waiting.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us here. We were really excited when we got the notification that we were about to celebrate our second proclamation year for Latinx and Hispanic month, and we wanted to take the time to come and just share some of our small steps of work. We really believe at Menlo Park that our number one priority is to help all families, every child feel safe. And as we hear, there's a lot of data that shows that kids aren't always feeling safe, but also to feel welcome. One thing I wanted to quickly share was we had our first booster Hispanic parent meeting on Tuesday, and I had one of the best compliments from Leticia, one of the moms I've been working closely with to help build our parent involvement from the Hispanic community. And she was sharing with our new Booster Club president that I just really feel welcome here, and that's why I'm helping out. And that really made me feel proud that the intentional efforts we're doing are paying off, and people really notice a difference. So just a couple quick facts I wanted to share about our school, Menlo Park. We have at least 67 students whose home language is Spanish, and we know we have many other students that speak Spanish as a secondary language at our school. And some of the countries that are represented in the rich cultures that you were alluding to were Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, Peru, Puerto Rico, and Ecuador. And I'm sure there's a few others that we probably missed with some of our new students that we don't know so well. So again, we really believe that humble, small steps can lead to big change. And Laura's been a great partner in that success of taking little small steps. And just by reading the proclamation myself, I learned a lot of information that I was unaware of. So I appreciate that it helps to educate me to be a better leader. But a couple things we've done in the last couple years are making sure that our newsletters have been translated into Spanish and English. And it sometimes means our letters are a little shorter, so we're not taking 3 or 4 pages, but I feel like the important information is reaching home to more people. And then signs up in different languages throughout our school. We wanted to put an effort into doing that last year, and we're able to do that throughout the building. Just small steps like that, I think, help all people feel comfortable when they see words that they recognize. And then just making sure that as I'm hiring that I'm really making a conscious effort to get people into our building that represent our students. And that's sometimes challenging just because you don't always have the applicants you're looking for, but just making sure that I'm doing all I can to encourage family members or other people that I know that would be great additions to our school to come and volunteer till they feel comfortable and maybe then hire them on the staff. And I think that's the way we can grow our own population of educators that really represent our students. And I don't want to take all the time because I do love to talk, so I'll let Laura share a few things.
Thank you. And again, I'm Laura Chapman. I'm a language development specialist, and I feel really honored that part of my job description is to help support multiculturalism at our school, and I think it's really great that our district has a position for that. And so some of the things that we do at Menlo Park, last year during Hispanic Heritage Month, I worked with the librarian, and for every class we taught a story about the history of the Mexican flag, and then I had some students talk about it and make a video that we showed to the whole school. And we showed it during our morning meeting, and we always tried to highlight some parts about culture during our morning meeting. In the morning, we have all the students come to the gym, and they all sit there, and so we have that time where we can really push messages and tell them about what's going on in the community. We have our annual multicultural family potluck night, and last year we started a Hispanic Heritage Club during the Sun After School program with one of our Spanish-speaking staff members. She leads it, and they come and they play games in Spanish, and we really want to encourage that home language integrity, and we want students who speak Spanish at home to be proud of it, and we want them to have that community. And we looked at our Youth Truth Survey results from last year, and I think that also shows a lot of the inclusivity that we have at Menlo Park and at David Douglas. At our school, we have 93% of parents feel comfortable approaching teachers about their child's progress. And if we have that high of percentage, that means that parents feel of all cultures feel comfortable. 89% of parents felt teachers treat families with respect. 83% of parents said families and teachers care about each other. And 86% of students said they felt their teacher very much cared about them. And these percentages were also very similar throughout all of David Douglas School District.
Any questions?
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much for inviting us.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. So a couple other folks, Chris Kelly, I'm not sure if you felt comfortable giving testimony, but okay. I know you were kind of on the fence. I just want to honor the folks who did end up showing up. So some folks, just so that you are all aware, colleagues, weren't sure. So this is kind of the last set of folks here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Kelly. I'm an English language arts teacher at the high school, 10th and 12th grade. So to me, this proclamation is so important. I grew up in a town in the San Joaquin Valley in California. It's 65% Latino. So for me, something like this, I never had anything like this where I grew up, and I can say with confidence that I felt like I never belonged where I went to school. It was me and my brothers and my sisters and all my cousins and all my friends. We all kind of felt the same way, and that's a school of 65% Latinos, right? You can't assume that just because we're diverse that kids are going to feel welcome, and because many of our kids don't always feel welcome, especially if they're displaced from other parts of Portland or other parts of the world. Sometimes we just assume that they feel like this is a place where they can feel like they belong. So I think it gives them a fighting chance to make a home, build a life in a place where they feel like they maybe don't have a home and don't have a safe place where they can build a life. So I bring it up because, right now the staff of the district is not representative of the population, of the student body. And it because when I see them walk into my classroom and they see a brown face, the little glimmer in their eyes, or when they see the last name Cisneros or Valdez on a book that we're going to read throughout the year, they're like, oh, okay, there's some Spanish names here. Like, I think I might like this class. It makes a world of difference, and it just gives them a chance to feel like they belong somewhere. And I'll wrap this up. I was texting my mom a couple weeks ago before the school year started. I was asking for some yearbook photos. It's a dumb reason, but anyways. So, she texted me, and she was saying, I'm so proud of you that you're so much smarter. You went to college. You're a teacher now, and I never could have seen myself doing things like this. And it just makes me think, what she could have become and could have been if she was in a place where she felt like she belonged, because she never had that opportunity. And I think of my cousins and my friends and my family that didn't make it because they never felt welcome. I'm a descendant of Tejanos, so we've known how to navigate these tricky racial waters of America for a long time. So, me and my brother made it, but I know a lot of people that didn't, and I think, we owe it to them to make proclamations like this, and then also, follow through and deliver on more action to make sure that they have a place where they can, thrive and call home and build a community. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Hung Pham, did you want to share remarks? You don't have to. Okay. Thank you so much for coming and waiting. Appreciate it.
Oh no, that's a hot seat. Of course it was. It's so cool. Good evening, everyone. It feels so powerful and honored to be here tonight. Thank you for having me. I feel, as a person of color, I feel, even though I'm not Latino or a person in that area, but I feel it's really great and awesome and impactful that we acknowledge and we celebrate that holiday and make everyone feel welcome. I forgot to introduce my name. It's okay. I'm currently working at Fort Lyon Middle School as an IA with the special ed kids. And I feel like I'm the first person. I'm the first Vietnamese employee over there, and I feel really impactful with all the students. I cannot speak on behalf of all the Asian community, but last year when I worked directly with all the Vietnamese family and children, and I feel like they all need something. They don't feel welcome, and they don't feel connected and belong, especially with the new immigrant and refugee. I reached out to all of the new Vietnamese kids over there, at least 5 kids who are really, really new to the country for the first time, come to school, and then I feel so good, oh, you speak Vietnamese? And yes, I do speak Vietnamese. And then I feel really welcome, and whenever they have a question or any concern, and they come to me, and I feel like, I did something different to the student, because I was in that position before, and I feel like, I do something like this to pay back to the community like this. And I feel like school, we are very diversity, and we not only acknowledge with Latinos but we care more about other ethnicity like Asian, Pacific Asian, and then other countries as well. And I have a few more concerns that we do not see much people of color to represent our kids in our school, to inspire them and to impactful for their skill and to their life as well. For example, kids say, I can't believe it that you work at school. Most of the Vietnamese people working at the nail salon or something, but I'm really have a different look, different perspective that, Vietnamese people can work at school as well. And I feel like, I do something different. And so when they reach out to the school, they feel really welcome and connected and belong when they can speak the language. And I feel that is something is really important, that communication, because sometimes we found that parents really nervous because the language barrier, they cannot communicate and they don't know how to reach out to the family. But we have at least one person of that ethnicity to represent the kids, and that's make a lot of difference. And I feel like one of the Chinese kids come to me and say, I never seen any Chinese teacher at our school. And I feel like, maybe someday, or maybe you could be the first one in the school, and say, but I'm not interested in education. My parents want me to be a doctor. I'm like, I cannot speak on that, but like, yeah, you do whatever is the best for you. But like, we have someone that represent for our kids to be a leader. That's really really powerful and impactful for our kids. And I really love to see more people of color, especially for all the minority people, to represent for our district, so to make people feel connected and feel more welcome to come to school. So yeah, thank you again for having me tonight.
Thank you so much. So you don't have anyone else formally on the panels, but is there anyone else who is in the audience who would like a minute or two to share on this proclamation? Okay, well, thank you all so much again for taking time out of your busy schedules. And I will just say before I read the proclamation that I have all your contact information now, so you will be hearing back from me on other ways to continue to get engaged. I really appreciate everything that you said. And with that, I will go ahead and read the proclamation. So, David Douglas School District proclaiming the celebration of National Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month. Whereas the Latinx heritage of the United States extends historically over 5 centuries and has been a consistent and vital influence in our country's growth and prosperity, and whereas Latinx culture is tied to Iberian ancestry, and our culture recognizes that Latinxes are multiracial and multicultural who can trace their historical roots to indigenous and African ancestry, and whereas Latinxes in Oregon are a diverse mix of first-generation immigrants and longtime residents. The definition of Latinx is tied to the cultures across 24 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, including the United States, Mexico, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, Guatemala, Belize, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Honduras, Nicaragua, Panama, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Paraguay, Uruguay, Brazil, Venezuela, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, and Spain. They reflect an array of distinct and vibrant cultures that have enriched our community in valuable ways, and whereas Hispanic Heritage Month was started as a Heritage Week in 1968 and begins on September 15th, which is the anniversary of the independence of 5 Latin American countries, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, and whereas the theme for this year's Heritage Month is a history of serving our nation and invites us to reflect on the service and contributions of Hispanic and Latinx people in the United States, and whereas Latinxes have supported Portland's economy with many contributions and leadership in the fields of commerce, science, technology, public service, health, arts, and more. Today, their purchasing power in Portland is nearly $4 billion. And whereas despite these contributions and leadership, Hispanic and Latinx communities are still less likely to work in managerial or professional occupations, have a median household income that is significantly lower than non-Hispanic whites, and more than 20% reported living at the poverty level in 2015. And whereas Hispanic people have the highest medical uninsured rates of any racial or ethnic group within the U.S., which is attributed to linguistic and cultural barriers and a lack of access to preventative care, and whereas racially motivated discrimination and harassment is at a local and national high, with the spike in hate crimes reported against the Latinx community, and whereas 68% of Hispanic Latinx students in David Douglas School District High School were bullied last year and said it was due to their race or skin color, and 62% said it was because of, quote, where their family is from, higher than any other racial or ethnic group. And whereas we recognize that given the hardships and disparities faced by the Latinx community, this proclamation is only a small step of many that we need to take to be truly inclusive and supportive of our Latinx students and their families. And whereas 26.58% of, or 2,690 students enrolled are Hispanic and or Latinx, and the Hispanic-Latinx student count has increased by 918% over the past 23 years from 1995 to 2018. And students who self-identified as Hispanic also identified as American Indian Alaskan Native, Asian, Black, Pacific Islander, and multiracial. And whereas 78.1% of Latinx students in the 2017-2018 four-year cohort graduated, of which when disaggregated by sex, 85.7% of self-identified Latinx female students graduated, and 69.2% of self-identified Latinx male students graduated. And whereas 14% of the ASB student leadership has identified as Latinx, and whereas the Latinx Student Union organizes and promotes student success for Latinx students, and whereas 6.66% of district leadership, supervisors, managers, and principals have self-identified as Latinx, and whereas as of April 2019, David Douglas School District has 86 employees who identify as Hispanic Latinx, which includes a 16% increase in classified staff from the previous year. And whereas Spanish is the second most commonly spoken home language in the district with 1,645 Spanish-speaking homes. And whereas last year, David Douglas High School hosted its first Spanish language graduation, and during the event, students shared multilingual poetry and songs that celebrated diverse Hispanic and Latinx cultures. And whereas our Hispanic and Latinx families lead and actively participate in groups across school campuses, including intercambio groups at several elementary schools, Latino parent groups across the district, culturally specific family nights, and more. And whereas the David Douglas School District is committed to and advocates for equal educational, professional, and social opportunities for Latinx students, and whereas the David Douglas School District Strategic Hiring Plan outlines a goal to increase staff of color by 10% by 2020 so that district staff more accurately reflect the student population, and district leadership has prioritized representation of the David Douglas District community in leadership positions, both employee and board. And whereas the David Douglas School District has adopted educational equity policy and an equal educational opportunity policy that states our commitment to closing the achievement gap for Latinx students and creating an educational environment where all students can benefit equally from the educational programs offered. And whereas the Oregon State Legislature has passed a $2 billion investment, the Student Success Act, into Oregon's K-12 schools, $1 million specifically for the Latinx Student Success statewide plan. And whereas the district is working towards eliminating the racial predictability and disproportionality on all aspects of education and has recently established a racial equity committee. And whereas the district collaborates and partners with community-based organizations like Latino Network, El Programa Hispano, and El Programa Hispano to form strong relationships in a culturally appropriate way and to provide the space for feedback and guidance to district leaders on improving outcomes and opportunities for Latinx students and families in the district. Now, therefore, be it further resolved that the David Douglas School Board of Directors do hereby proclaim September 15 through October 15 to be Latinx Heritage Month in recognition and celebration of the many contributions of Latinxes to the country and to our community. And be it further resolved that the David Douglas School Board of Directors strongly encourages staff and community to observe, recognize, and celebrate the culture, heritage, and contributions of Latinxes to our country, our state, our cities, and our schools. So before I kick it off to Ken for closing, I just wanted to thank everyone, who took time out of their days to be here. I also wanted to really thank cabinet folks and all the others who helped in draft the proclamation. This is certainly not something that I do on my own. It takes an enormous amount of scrambling from people who are really responsive and are very deeply appreciated. So thank you all very much.
So I get a minute to speak, and it will be a minute, but I want to somehow, some way, I made Andrea, Board Chair Valderrama, upset some more because you always have me follow the most powerful testimony in the proclamation. So I don't know what I can really say, to be quite honest, that wasn't said, and obviously said much better than I could ever say it. So I'll start with first, thank you. Thank you so much for having a voice, for being here, being a champion for this proclamation, and tell you how privileged I am and honored I am to be a champion as as well, alongside of you, that we are taking this stand as a board, following leadership, and ultimately listening to your voice. That's the intention here. And with that, thank you. I want to say I heard two themes, and really one is the celebration and recognition and how powerful it is, and it's so fun, but I also to be here and to listen and to learn and develop. But I also heard another theme, and the other theme is based on data, based on testimony, is there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot more we can do, and I can tell you how excited I am, how excited to have youth and youth voice here to help drive us and push this, to have administrators, have teachers, have license, have community partners, all with, I hope, a commitment to move and continue this work and to continue to not only celebrate, recognize, but also to call each other and have the conversations when we aren't doing it well enough, when we aren't hitting the target. And I'll be the first to admit, and I know leadership team around this table and out there are places we can improve, need to improve, and will improve, and that will be through your work and your voice and your helping us and partnering with us. So I just wanted to make sure to recognize that and say that. I also want to recognize with the celebration, we had a administrator and LDS here communicating, but the reality of the intentional work that is happening in our buildings, and through the proclamation and the voice and the recognition, many of our teachers are taking this extra step. Many of our administrators are going through, and really this is the sad part, it shouldn't be an extra step. It should just be part of our curriculum, part of what we do, and it should be embedded all the way through. So I look forward to that day. I look forward to continue, and I look forward to recognizing that this isn't September 15th to October 15th. Yes, we're celebrating it, but it's September 4th or whenever we started through June 16th and the summer, and really it should be an ongoing whole year activity celebration for all of our students and specifically our Latinx population. So thank you so much for being here. One last thing, I want to take the little privilege here, and Andrea and I talked about this, and it's a fit, but we do have an introduction we'd like to do tonight, and you actually met her already because she helped in this process, but I do want to turn it over to Kelly and ask if maybe she'll introduce one of our newest employee and family members to the David Douglas community.
So tonight, we'd like to welcome Aide Juarez, who will be joining us as our new Family and Community Partnerships Coordinator. She actually just met with HR yesterday in her orientation, and tomorrow is actually her first official day with our school district. So welcome, Aide. So real quick, Aide has always been a part of our family. She most recently was working with Latino Network as our school, let me see if I can get, school navigator and health and wellness specialist here at David Douglas High School last spring, and then most recently was working at Jefferson High School, but then we hired her this summer. So please be sure we will be sending out an email with her contact information, her new phone extension, and please reach out to her, and we will be there to support you in any way we can with family and community partnerships. So welcome, Aide. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Aide, for choosing David Douglas. Really appreciate it. And Andrea, last thank you is just to the board, to your leadership, to the entire leadership, but really the entire board for making space for this. I think it makes a difference. Thank you.
Colleagues, does anyone have any remarks or testimony that you wanted to share? Okay.
I'll make a remark. I'd like to thank you for continuing to take the helm and move us forward in making these proclamations.
Thanks. Sure.
Just want to say thank you to everyone's testimony, especially students. I myself am an immigrant and have had to learn new languages and culture, so I really appreciate the input. Thank you.
Anyone else? Sure.
I just want to thank you too, Andrea, and everybody came in today kind of helping to raise the universal culture consciousness around this issue, and you know, lifting people up I think makes us all stronger, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to consent. Thank you, everyone. So we have a consent item. It's an action item. Let's see, I'll give everyone a minute Do we want to take a break, maybe? Okay, so let's take a break. Or oh wait, can we take a photo with everyone? We're gonna take a break.
Come back. We want a picture. Don't leave yet.
2-minute break. Me apologize about that, but we'll go ahead and get back in settled here to the next item, which is the consent agenda item. This is an action item. Do we have any discussion or move to approval?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Great. Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is that everyone? All right. And the motion passes for approval of the consent agenda. The next item we have is the superintendent's report. Ken?
Thank you very much. And I am gonna, there's quite a few points this evening. I'm going to try to be very brief and move through it quickly, but obviously some of it you'll hear we're going to be following up on a lot in the next couple months. But the very first thing I just want to recognize and thank Brooke and an individual from her team in One Step at a Time, but you'll notice we do have some art recognized on the shelf and displayed over there. We're trying to re-envision this space a little bit and bring more student work in. We've talked about STEAM, we've talked about art. So this is first step. You'll see more once we find some space for some of these books and curriculum. Our hope is you'll start to notice a little transformation of this space as we have board meetings and meetings in here in general. So I wanted to just recognize that and thank Brooke and her team and actually the custodial team that has been helping set up as well. So really appreciate that change and that focus. Also, just want to real quickly recognize, obviously, first board meeting since the start of our school year. And what an exciting time of the year. I know I've had an opportunity to share with the board through emails, and I truly love this time of year, getting families, getting life back into our schools. There's nothing like it. In my opinion, it's my favorite time of year. Just that energy that comes with schools, everything from the co-curricular, extracurricular, the classrooms in general. It's just a great feel. And I want to reach out to our community, to our board members, to everyone involved, staff, students, just thanking them for a smooth start, thanking them for their patience, thanking them for their flexibility. I'll be first to tell you, when you bring 10,000 students, one day they aren't here and the next day they are here, there are bumps. There's different things that we're working through as a team. That includes families, parents, community-based organizations. Drive down in front of Alsot before or after school sometimes, and the patience it takes, or Gilbert Park. So the reality is our community comes together, recognize, and keep everyone safe. It makes a difference. So just want to say how excited we are for another school year and thank our community for all of the flexibility, patience, leadership, voice, partnerships, etc. I am going to say something, although we have a full report around enrollment, but enrollment in general, I've sent some information and there are some definite talking points. I'm just going to leave it there because Candy will say, well, what do you want me to report on? You just said everything. So I won't say anything, but there's definitely a lot to talk about there. With that said, I'm going to transition. I have really two things other than announcements. One is I want to give some feedback based on our last board meeting. If you remember, Stephanie talked about trying to give more feedback when community members come and testify. How do we circle back around? And I wanted to share with the board that there are many ways that happens, from emails. Sometimes we send cards. We do follow up different times. But there's also a process in place for board members that if you would like, anytime there's any public presentation, that if you say, hey, Ken, Superintendent, will you please bring this back? Will you please connect? Will you please follow through? It'll happen. And in this case, Stephanie did say, hey, can we have some follow-up on this? And some of it we were planning on and some of it we weren't, but once she asked that, we're going to follow through and kind of share. So, and I think it's all important to share, and some of it I have shared already, but publicly to recognize there was a few things that we had last week. If you remember, we had an individual coming for Moms Demand Action, and specifically she talked about the Be Smart program on gun violence. I wanted to let the board know that what we've done with that is we've taken that materials and that information and we've shared it with our administrative and counseling teams to kind of say, here's a resource. We have another program that was actually used off and on and still is, called Eddie Eagle, I believe, but the bottom line, this is just another tool added to that toolbox that we've reached out. I think we already have, but if we haven't, it is in the works, and Florence and Mary both kind of team there. But anyway, so that's one. Second is we had a parent from Gilbert Park come around a number of different items. So just quickly following up and sharing, and I can say the good news is we have been following up with each of these and already had work started on many of them. But the number one question, and actually no order, excuse me, but there was a question about the native land recognition and the reality that the board's made this change and gone to a native land recognition. Could our schools do that? Could our schools actually go through that process to recognize? And I want you to know that we've already had, before we had that testimony, a few principals connect and say, hey, we noticed that. Is that something we can do? Can we do that in our schools? And the answer is yes, absolutely. I don't know right now if anyone has, but we definitely said yes. The one change to remind the board is that the Pledge of Allegiance is required by law. There's a process for that, so we can't make that change. The Pledge of Allegiance would still be there, but could our schools, through an assembly, through community meetings, over the announcements, through classroom, do the land recognition? Absolutely. And I would guess we might already have a couple schools that are. But the second step is our first administrative meeting that's happening after school starts is next week, and we plan to bring this to our entire administrative team and said, hey, this has been asked. I want you to know what you can do, what that looks like, how we can help, and that the board's doing it. So just kind of quick update there. Second question, and again, no real order, but the question was around fundraising and really discrepancy around fundraising. And should we do something as a district to recognize if one school has means to bring in a certain level through fundraising and another school does not? Should we as a district, and maybe through board policy, kind of direct that a little different and balance that out a little different? I can tell you what we started with that is, what is the data? What is the ground floor here? And I've asked Pat through her team to put together, where do we have fundraisers? How much are they bringing in? How disparate is it? What does that look like? So we started that process. So I really don't have a lot to report now, but my intention is once we have the data and can say per school, this is what it looks like, then we can bring it back to the board and have a conversation about that. Is there something we should look at? And if you want our leadership team to talk about a recommendation, or if the board would like to put together recommendations, we'll have that conversation. So,
do you have a timeline on that?
I don't. Pat, do you know?
I'm kind of holding off right now because auditors are here next week and we're trying to get our audit done. So probably not till November or December.
The next was a conversation, a question about behavioral charts, and specifically behavior charts within a school, and the parent talked about her students and experience. I can tell you the good news is that Gilbert Park specifically had already started the process through their leadership team of making that change and going through education at the school, so that's great. They were a step ahead of it, but I think the parent was really talking about, okay, great, even if we are going in that direction at Gilbert Park, what about the district? What about the entirety of the district? What's that look like? And we've started having that conversations at the cabinet level, and I can tell you I'm very excited to say that we're moving down a direction around restorative practices. We actually, next week, we have an entire admin training around restorative practices, and then we have a targeted specific group that we're rolling it out. So we're phasing it in over 3 years through the entire district. We're starting with piloting specific schools. I can say Fir Ridge is our first school that's bringing on restorative practices full bore, and then our high school has certain classrooms, middle schools have certain classrooms, and we're going to kind of build from there. So very related, not quite exactly, but that's the intent of it, is more restorative type look. And then finally looking at this, I think the last question that was brought up had to do with mascots. And this one specifically, I can tell you, rather than it's kind of ongoing and heard we have a lot on our plate, so one step at a time. But the mascots, we started down the process right away. Specifically, we had the report or question and concern brought to our attention at Gilbert Park that there was the Betsy Ross flag, and basically what that has been co-opted by certain groups, what that represented by certain groups. And I can say when I spoke to the principal, they had already started that conversation as well. So we made the decision immediately to go through the process of removing the graphic of the Betsy Ross flag from the front area. We're working on that to kind of go something temporary to around the district. Letterhead, if you look on the webpage, it's gone. I'd like to report that it's 100% everywhere. I don't know if there's some wall somewhere that we've missed. We're trying our best. We have not removed the Patriot. They are still the Patriots, so the gym floor still says Patriots, but the graphic representation of the Betsy Ross flag right now is removed. And then from there, the principal has started the conversation with the leadership team, the parent leadership team, and then ultimately has not yet, but will ultimately with the students. Let's go through this process. Let's select a new mascot. What is that? And so we've kind of handed it over, although we're here to support. We're following their lead. I have asked Principal Moncrief if when they get to the process where they have something to report, that they'd come report, that they'd come share, not for the board to, quote, decide or not decide, but to give input on, and also the possibility of them coming to report to the equity committee. With all of that said, it's kind of, we're looking at it as a pilot as well, because our hope is as we go through this process, then we can develop kind of, here is the process that's publicized, because we have had other schools that have asked, and if it is asked by another school, we can say, look, we have a process, this is what it looks like, and we go from there. So those were the specific questions that were asked last board meeting that I wanted to, again, Stephanie asked, and I think it's great that we follow up on. So.
Just one question in regard to collecting the data on fundraising, because I've been doing fundraising for 40 years and I've done a lot in the schools. There are some schools that the school does the fundraisers, and there's some schools that the parent group does the fundraisers. So if you might be able to break those two out, because it makes a difference on who's doing the fundraising. I know it takes more to do it, but it might help a little bit in understanding the total amount the school's raising. And it's going to really depend on how active a parent group is too, whether fundraising is more successful.
And what school it is. So I know the elementary schools are pretty, like your kid comes home the second week of school with cookie dough and gift wrap or whatever. You got more than one kid, then you get a whole bunch of stuff. But in the high school, how's that going to be counted? Because the band does a fundraiser, track team does a fundraiser, the golf team does a fundraiser. Every little club and group is doing their own thing. I mean, only one group sells beds. That's probably an easy one to count. But, I've got my second high schooler, and I've gotten a full, complement of pies and plant sales and, you name it, it's been home. So how are we going to try and nail down all, or are we going to skip those groups as that's not really a school fundraiser, it's specifically for, the track team, or it's specifically for band?
Yeah, so great question. One of the reasons that Pat said, hey, November, December, because it does take some time, and there's a lot to this. Even if we just did the elementary, there's a lot of different levels, different groups, so really talking about it. And I think ultimately, one step at a time. So for example, in my mind, what I'm thinking about is if we focus on elementary first and get that tackled, we can go to the middle school and then the high school. The point is, I don't know that it will input the conversation as much as policy and practice, but I think it is important for us to get to a point where we know every single fundraising activity that occurs, what it's for, and an idea of how much we're getting. I think that's healthy, and that's a good thing. So, would it be that, hey, the golf team brought this in for golf, and now we're looking at that through distribution or how that plays out? I don't know that that's the case, but at least to know our high school has these different fundraisers, this is what it looks like. Our elementary has these different ones, and then we can have the conversation. So, and with that said, I don't know that I have the exact answer yet, Christine, until we see what we...
There's just going to be, I think there's going to be a long list of things for the high school.
Yeah.
So Ken, before you go further.
Yes, please.
In your superintendent's report, because we have some really important things to talk about, I just want to thank you, because in the 2 years that I've been on the board, it's been so frustrating to know that things are happening, but to have to sit here dumb when people are giving testimony and then not have the feedback loop happen. So I just want to thank you for that short update. Tonight, when I get home, I'm going to email both of those people and say, here's the point on the video where you can get answers to what you want. And I just want to thank you, because I feel like it shows that we actually do listen. We actually do work on these things. We may not be able to respond to every single point every testimony makes. You know, some of them we just can't do everything, but I feel so thankful that I'm able to actually see the feedback loop happen, circle back with the people in our community, you know, and thank you for your work, all of you. It shows how responsive I think Douglas really is, and sometimes that's missed, right, in these public meetings, so thanks.
And I'll just quickly, sorry to interrupt. I think Donna was actually one of the first people who brought that to my attention. So I just want to make a shout out to you for your idea on there.
Just one more comment on the fundraising, just because it's my thing. Only because if you're collecting data, that is data.
Yes.
But personally, in competition with Menlo Park back when, is there are parent groups, as I called it, fun, in quotes, raising, where you raise very little money, but you created fun and community and family involvement. Then there were other groups that were fundraising. And so when you're gathering the data, you also, with those parents group, you've got to see what their focus is. Is it on getting parent involvement, or is it raising funds to buy something for the school? There's distinct differences in what you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and also would just second that. In the research happening, I know, for example, there are some specific parent groups who predominantly work on that like engagement piece, and I think if we were to end up doing any type of policy around this, what I would be interested in looking at and ultimately make a determination on is, one, how much funds are being raised, but then also like ultimately what is the impact that these parents are making regardless of the funds that they are raising or not, and whether it's more like community based or health related, etc. So it would be useful just to get like a little bit more information on like what the range of, not to just look at you, Pat, sorry, whoever can.
Can we help? I mean, we each have 2 schools
Yeah,
or
I'm happy to
3,
help too.
right?
Yeah.
Where we're supposed to be so maybe that's something that we can ask as board members when we visit our schools. Principals is like,
yeah, because that's
ask some of those
point
deeper
Frida.
questions, because Pat, I mean, that's a lot of schools for you.
That is a lot of schools, and we need to realize that PTA booster clubs are separate from the school district. They are separate. They are not in our financial system. They should not be in our financial system. So,
And we don't control.
right. So we can't say, you know, if this one decides that they want to do a huge fundraiser, we really can't go and dictate that the funds be moved to all the schools or spread to all the schools. So I just want to make sure that's.
So the report that or the research that you're doing right now is on, and I know I stepped out for a few minutes, but on which groups?
So what I'll be trying to collect is both. I'll be trying to collect what are our booster PTAs doing. That one's going to be a little more amorphous than going into our own system and looking at where are we getting funds from, what have we been doing to acquire those funds. Because you're going to see all sorts of things, and that's where you might be surprised, because we get things like there's targeted money from Office Depot Fred Meyer. When you go shop there, I want to donate to X school. So that is dedicated funding that we really cannot redirect. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
we even have wills. We have trusts actually that's money that's been donated through a will that is to this program or this school. So it's really big, and I want to thank the board for some flexibility around timing, because it is.
You don't realize it because I'm being on the foundation and handling their books. We have money that goes to special programs that is donated us that goes to a special program at a school.
Right.
You know, so there's funding coming from many sources.
Can I just ask though? I think that at least I would be very interested in not so much the breakdown, because I know that sounds very complex, but what is that overall disparity from one school to another, regardless of where it came from, who raised it or whatever, to know, well, these schools bring in $20,000 and these schools bring in $2,000.
Yep.
Like, it would be really I'm really interested to know what that is.
Yeah. And I think that was the intent of the question, really, and that is the intent of us getting the research and ultimately the data. We have to put the data together because of how big and complex it is, but that is definitely what we're trying to target. So, and again, thank you for your flexibility, a little bit of patience. Talked about the mascot work. I know Principal Moncrief would thank you as well. They've started it, but it is a little slow. She's opening a school, so she's waiting a few weeks to really dig into the work. Just like Pat, a couple months we'll dig into some of this work, but it's a time of year. Hopefully that doesn't sound like an excuse. Also recognize, thank you, Stephanie, but it's not me, it's the team and really the board creating this space for this feedback and recognizing and thanking those community members that come and are willing to share and ask the questions, right? Because that's what generates this conversation. So thank you. With that said, I do want to transition and have a conversation, and I promised our chair I'd be brief, but it is very important, I think, to recognize we have some timelines coming up and some work, and so I have some asks. I've been partnering and working with board leadership around our Student Success Act, and you do have a pamphlet in front of you that looks like this that has a number of materials, and I will recognize those. I promise I won't go through them in detail, but before that I just want to go through a quick summary and remind you that signed into law in May of 2019, the Student Success Act is an opportunity, and many say historic, which I do believe, historic opportunity for our schools, Oregon education, but I'm going to focus on David Douglas. When fully implemented, this act will invest approximately $2 billion for early learning and K-12 education, and more importantly, close to $500 million will go directly to Oregon schools, right? So we know next year, specifically in the middle of biennium, there's going to be $500 million that come to Oregon schools specifically. With that said, well, I'll get to that in a minute. So ultimately, that will go into an account called the Student Investment Account, and that's what I'm going to want to talk about a little bit this evening. This account is a non-competitive grant. The focus of the Student Investment Account is on key areas for improvement, and this is the important part, from reducing class size, increasing instructional time, addressing health and safety needs, and ensuring a well-rounded education. The law requires, this is the right work, I don't care if it's required or not because this is the exciting part, but it does require that we have a meaningful engagement of our stakeholders to determine the best way to invest this money and these resources, which is part of what I'm going to be talking about tonight in the process. So ultimately, the idea is to get local community and voices that, while we can explicitly focus on student mental and behavioral health, addressing disparities based on race or disability, improving teaching and learning outcomes, which I'm going to summarize that in a minute. So a few of the quick talking points, and again, just this one page, and then we'll get into more of a just free-flow conversation. The Student Success Act marks a turning point. When fully implemented, our state will see additional $1 billion. I already said that. This offers a new opportunity to improve outcomes for students. So again, how can we do things differently? How can we invest what's working? But how can we do things differently to truly implement change? Our school district has an important role to play, and that's everyone at this table, but also our community in general. And I want to be clear, we can't do this alone. We shouldn't, but we can't by law, and we can't in general the work. And that's where we look at, you might be asking, well, how much are we going to get? And we don't know yet. Hasn't been formalized, but I can tell you it's a range, and I believe that range is anywhere from $5 million to $8 million. So next year, through this grant account, which we will be applying for, we will get somewhere between 5 and 8. And the reason I'm saying 5 and 8, $500 million, if you look at some of our ratios, we typically get about 1%. So every $100 million, we typically get $1 million on certain formulas. So I'd say the floor is $5 million extra. But the reality is they're double weighting poverty and double weighting a couple other indicators. And there is one document that came out, not from those who allocate it, but from the revenue office anyway, that says we're probably going to receive about $8 million. That is not official. That's unofficial. So right now we don't know. But the reality of investing $8 million next year for our students, our family, our community, wow, how exciting is that? And what are the steps we're going to take and go through it? So we need staff, student, family voices in this conversation, and ultimately want to make sure absolutely everyone's represented in many different formats. And the bottom line is the input is going to be help to develop and adjust our strategic plan, our continuous improvement plan, and then our student investment account plan. If you look at, I'm just going to show you this first page. You saw this is really talked about 50% That's the account we're talking about, the student investment account. But if you turn the page over, this is really what I wanted to point out to this team, is there's 5 areas for input. If you look there, I'm not going to read them, but to the right, 5 areas for input. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need to go through a process, and we are going to go through a process to get input. But then ultimately, through that input, the allowable investments is down on the pencil graphic. And I've already read both of these, but ultimately class size, well-rounded education, instructional time, and health and safety. So with that all being said, I wanted to make sure to bring to the board to recognize that this work is coming. And if you go through the packet, the very next page says stay on track, develop a communications and engagement plan to document your progress. I'm not going to read from here, but you can see those first 3 boxes. That's what we're working on. We're currently working on a plan, working on a process to ensure that we're going through these steps. Again, you can look at all this later, but I'm going to turn the page. I'm going to look at August and September. You can see the planning guide, and you can see in September, we're currently in September, it says begin to engage community and stakeholders in the needs assessment. So that's why it's really, I wanted to take this time to have this conversation today, because we're rolling. We're going now, and I'll share a little bit of our plan in a minute. But ultimately, September, we're going to be starting this process. October, it continues. And the idea is by the end of October, you've gathered input, so now you can really work on the actual plan. So with that said, the rest of the document is just information for you. I have provided this through email as well. If you have questions, please let me know. I wanted to get on record, 1, wanted to talk to the board, 2, make sure there's not questions, but then 3, give you a quick outline. Right now, we've started the process of developing a survey that's going to go to all of our students, all of our families, and as many community members that we can get contact with through both social media, through email, all avenues we have, our webpage. There'll be a link to the survey. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second is we're going to hold community forums that matches our Your Voice Matters. Only to be targeted around Your Voice Matters, it's Student Investment Account or Student Success Act, and we need your input. And that process is, we have 3 of them scheduled right now. They're tentative. We have not published it, but the first one is next Tuesday, actually the Tuesday after next. So the 26th, help me, Cabinet, I believe the 26th, 24th, thank you. 24th, we are targeting our first. Our intention is to get a communication out on Wednesday. And the reason it's taking some time is because we want to attach our survey with the communication. It's kind of a cover page that says, we need your input, and it's kind of a community media blast, and then we keep rolling and rolling and rolling. But the very first one is going to be the 24th. We have one scheduled on the 8th, and then we have our last one, and this is, we haven't quite done, but there's a possibility that our October 24th workshop as a board will be the same Your Voice Matters process, where the board would all be there as well. So we'll see if that actually works out. If not, we'll change the date. So there's that, and then on top of that, what we've done with our student Your Voice Matters in the past is through Kelly's leadership, we've reached out to our community-based organizations and had the same process, the exact same going through the education of what it is and then getting input, but we do it with our culturally specific groups. So for example, last year when we did it with our Hispanic and Latinx population, it was basically run in Spanish, and the interpreters were there for me, not the other way around. So they really appreciated that context, and we do that with each of our major represented groups. So we go through that process. And then the last one, we also are going to be reaching out to our schools, secondary specifically, and not only the survey, but our hope is to go to the schools, meet with the different groups, so leadership, BSU, LSU, hopefully all together, to do the same presentation and gather input. So it's a presentation, and then there's an activity that we're going to go through to get input. So real nutshell, real kind of moving, but I wanted you to know that you're going to start seeing this throughout our district because we're going to start blasting it out and getting the invites out, and ultimately one step at a time to gather input to ultimately drive our decision-making process through the student investment account. I think we have a question over there.
Did you say when you reach out to the schools for input, you're going to be reaching out to the secondary schools and not the primary schools?
So the primary schools, we are not going to go do the presentation like with the leadership. There really isn't leadership necessarily with kids at the elementary schools. So we're going to do that. But as far as the community, the parents, and the one piece I did leave out is our union leadership. We're currently partnering with them. We've already talked with DDA and actually had a planning session, mini planning session. We're going to be reaching out to our classified group as well. And our intent is to do this in partnership. So we'll release a survey in partnership with them. And our hope, not hope, but what we're going to do is next Thursday, again, with our first admin, we're going to do this presentation with our admin, and the ask is then they're going to go back to their buildings and then with their union reps basically do the exact same activity with their staffs. So we'll be getting the input from our staff as well. They also can take the survey. They can go through the survey process, but they'll be going through the activity, and they will be invited to our community evening events as well. We're going to be holding those evening events at our middle schools, so north, center, south, kind of dividing it up in the different times. Other questions, it's meant to be kind of a snapshot, let you guys know. I think Andre and Stephanie and I are going to stay after tonight and talk a little bit. And I've got a couple asks and hopes, but one way or the other, all of your voices matters as well. Do you have a question?
In regards to the survey, in what languages will it be available?
Yeah, so we translate into our top 5 languages. Yeah, so we go through the process of translating, which it will be translated. Do not get me wrong, it will be translated. The issue is we have a release date of Wednesday of next week. Translating a document, a single document, you guys all know this. Translation a document, there's a process to go through that we can do. A survey is different though. It's so broken up, so getting that done, we got all hands on deck and we'll get there. We'll get there. If it's not till Friday, I apologize.
So the time frame seems extremely pressured. I'm just assuming that's because of all the regulation coming down.
Well, go ahead, Stephanie.
No, I was just saying, I'm sure it's because of the fiscal year when it starts and when the funds get allocated.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, to be quite honest, for example, the toolkit that ODE's released, it's not even officially released. It's released for input. This Friday is when we're supposed to be giving input to say, so we made a decision as the leadership team, we're moving forward. We're going to show the state what the best practice is. We're going to show them how to gather input. We're going to show them. And to be quite honest, I'm fairly proud of a lot of work through Brooke's team and our entire cabinet and administrator, but our continuous, our CIP process was outlined in the actual toolbox I sent to you. And so some of this, well, I'm not even going to say that, but the bottom line, we're in front on some of it, and we're going to continue to move forward. And ultimately, if we find out, Aaron, that, they changed the rules a bit, we'll take 2 steps back, and we'll regroup and keep moving forward. So, yeah.
Are there any particular guidelines or limitations on the way the input can be gathered, or are we free to do that however every school district sees fit?
The only guidelines are that it's very clear that first is those 5 priorities, right? Second is the buckets, and really what has been developed through ODE, they're asking you to get input on the priorities, not even the buckets. That's something we're calling a bucket, but the investment areas, that's something we're adding. We want voice there. But really the big thing is that they're really, and extra focus, quote unquote, extra focus, which I think is good, on reaching students and families of color, students with disabilities, emerging bilingual students, students navigating poverty, homelessness, and foster care, and other students that have historically experienced disparities in our school. So very, very big push. The intentionality of this law in general, we need to demonstrate that. Now, with that said, any other way, I think everything's on as a possibility.
Well, that's why I was wondering, are we able, for instance, to incentivize the completion of the survey, for students and families, and especially because often those communities that you just specified, often if something is just given out as a blanket, we were talking about this at the equity meeting the other night, that the assumption is they don't really want to know what we think, they want to know what they think. Right? And so that there has to be extra steps taken that really says, no, we really want to hear your input. We really want to know what you think. So I'm just wondering, especially with the students sometimes, is it possible to say if you complete this survey, then you get entered in a drawing to win an Amazon gift card or some, whatever that just incentivizes all the students. Oh, I'm going to fill out my survey, or my parents, you win a Fred Meyer gift card, but something that really encourages them to participate. I just wonder, do we have the freedom, if there was that possibility, to do that?
Yes, we do. So there's nothing in the Student Success Act or Student Investment that talks about that at all. So that would really be this board and our current budget. The difficulty, and now difficulty doesn't mean I shouldn't use that word. The navigating, how do we navigate, is identifying budget to do that, because we didn't through the budgetary process, so we don't necessarily have budget identified for that. So we'd have to look at the current budget and say, okay, what would we call discretionary funds to do something like that? I could have a conversation with my team. I'm not going to put them on the spot now. If there's any grants we can think about, any opportunities in the future with the Student Success Act account of money coming in, I think future we could do it, but right now we're operating.
Or even getting the gift cards donated from business partners, community people who would give them to support this act for students.
Yeah.
That's a possibility as well.
That's a yes.
I love that idea, and if there's budget room, I would love to see how we can do that. I think to also kind of piggyback on what Ken said about answering your question, I really see this as an opportunity for our board and our district to lead and be creative in how we are engaging in a meaningful way our incredible district families and students. The legislation does not have particular requirements on how to engage, so X number of meetings or Y number of translations. But like Ken said, it does articulate or clearly state the types of student populations that must be engaged. And that's where I think we as a board have a particularly important role in, certainly we can wait for ODE's recommendations and guidance, but ultimately we know what is best for our students. And I think we have a lot of really great expertise here among us that we can go ahead and say, these are incentives that we know do work for our communities that we are representing. We can also have questions and dialogue with board or with the cabinet around not only after the survey is collected, but how the survey is being collected. If you all have ideas and thoughts on what that outreach strategy is, I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about that. So I do think that there's all these great ideas that I think we should be talking about now, or if you want to keep thinking about it in the next week, feel free to, check in with Ken about. But I think from the conversations that I'm hearing, we in this district, I think, are ahead of the curve. And so it'd be really, really great to figure out how we can actually meaningfully engage these folks. And I think we know how. We just have to kind of make sure we're on the same page about how to do that.
One question, since it seems to be moving forward, I'm making the assumption the state doesn't believe there's going to be an initiative to overturn it.
That's correct. Right now, there's no active signature gathering, the one group that was in the process of that pulled back. So at this point, they're full steam ahead. Yeah. I suppose we could get surprised, obviously, but right now, and you'll like next, the 20th, you'll get an invite. You probably already have. The county's putting something together. I mean, there's going to be workshops and different things going on weekly, monthly around this work, and we will have a place at all those tables as we move forward to make sure that we are listening, learning best practices, and sharing our practices as well. So exciting about the work. I
have a couple other questions.
Oh, you bet.
Sorry,
No
on this.
Yeah.
So a couple of other things. So I had mentioned earlier, though, about the outreach strategy, so I'd be curious to know a little bit more about kind of how we're getting the survey out to folks. Well, I'll stop there.
Okay. So the first step is we will, once the survey is completed, and it's in development right now, once it's translated, there'll be a passive push out, so that'll be Facebook, Twitter, on our webpage, so anyone can access it that way. And then the active is that through our email system, we'll send out an actual email basically with the link of the survey, inviting individuals to take that survey. And then our intention is basically from here on out, any forum, Middle school open houses are coming up. Fur Ridge open houses coming up. High school open houses coming up. Having tables there, both two ways. One is the opportunity, hey, the survey's coming. Are you willing to take it? Two is looking at that we're going to have basically visual representation and chart paper where people can give data that way and give feedback that way. So it's not necessarily the survey, but it's just another avenue. We also, again, next Thursday, when we meet with our admin and share this with our admin team, the ask will be not only to go through it with our staff, but any touch point that they have with their leadership team, their site council, is basically you should be having this conversation. You should be inviting, going through that process. And then we've talked about, on top of that, is really the specific invite. For example, I know Mary's very passionate about, there will be a general email that goes out to everyone, but then on top of that, we can identify any student that is identified with an IEP or a 504, where we can do a follow-up that's very intentional, inviting them to say, hey, as a parent who has a student with special needs, we really want to invite you to go through this. And I think we can do that with all of our we've also talked about reaching out to our community-based organizations and basically intentionally inviting them and asking them to help share the survey link and the information. And then lastly, when we met with our CBO, our culturally specific groups, over the years we've done is literally done the survey there, right? Done that with them, one question at a time, rather than saying, hey, go take this. And, if language is a barrier or technology is a barrier, we try to eliminate that and say, okay, let's do the survey right here and now. And we've had enough interpreters to go through one question at a time with the individuals, take the survey by hand, and then we've taken those results. So those are a few of the different ways. And then obviously if there's others that we're thinking of, for example, I know I'll look into incentives. I don't know where we can get. I will tell you that we've had individuals at Cabinet that suggested that, more of what if we did something. Yeah. So it's a great idea. Maybe you get into a drawing. So maybe it's not everyone gets one, but it's at least a drawing, or maybe we can get donations. We got hung up on the funding of it. Anyway, but if we could get people to donate. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
I also just want, you answered a couple of other questions that I had in terms of thinking through a technological divide. So that's good to know. I also just wanted to, flag, and it sounds like you are also thinking about this, seeing and potentially hearing impaired folks. So it sounds like you'll have at least someone able to read or be able to get the information to folks who maybe can't see screens or who can't necessarily hear. So that's good to know. I just want to make sure that we're being intentional about reaching those folks as well. And then a couple other questions. Can we get a copy of the survey, or did you send a link already? Or?
No, it's not completed yet.
Okay.
We're still, yes, you will. You'll see it before it's released.
Okay.
I'll make sure the board gets an email, one of my updates, so you'll have it.
Great.
But we're still developing it.
Great. And then when is the deadline for respondents to
for the
for the survey? So we send it out, and then we're saying please fill out by.
Yeah. So we were looking at the first week of November and the reason I'm a little washy is we're kind of looking at those dates still. Like, for example, we haven't firmed the October 24th, so some of those we're trying to firm up. But what we targeted was the first week of November. That's when it would close.
And then the last question is, how many are we hoping to have fill out the survey? Is there like a percentage of our population in general? Do we have like a goal?
We didn't talk about that. I can tell you what we got. We haven't talked about it,
okay.
Andrea. Unfortunately, if you look at surveys in general, the percentage that you can count on and when you think it's a good level or they tell you it's good is, personally, I don't think very good. For example, if you get 12 to 15%, that's a great return rate on a survey like this. I would hope we can get higher than that. We're going to push for higher than that. But we have not set a goal or a target around that yet.
I hate asking questions this time of night, but I do have one, which is, as somebody who worked on Vision PDX when we got 17,000 comments back, like open-ended responses, and considering we have 5 languages, what happens when those are returned in, Mandarin or what's that process?
Yeah. So that process is going through our ELD department, who have language liaison. We go through first to translate, and we did the survey in those languages. We asked them and gave them, please respond in your language. Then we went through the interpretation process. Once we did that, so that's just one step, is the interpretation process and get it. But then the next step is we go through, which many of us have been trained on, is going through the coding process. So looking at all the open-ended questions, and we're trying to do a balance, so it's not just open-ended, but there are open-ended, but there's also rated scales, so a 1 to 4 scale. So we'll have some questions that are 1 to 4, which one of these, kind of going through the process. But then the open-ended, once we get it all translated, supported, then we go through separating, and then we go through we call coding, where you actually go through the coding process. Yeah. So we did it with our survey we did 2 years ago. We did it with the survey that we did with our culturally specific groups and organizations. Youth Truth last year, that's one of the reasons we went to Youth Truth, is we didn't have to do that because their system did that for us. And we are going to do Youth Truth again. I mean, that helped us with our SIP or KIP. So, but it's a lot. It's a lot. It's exciting work. It's the right work. It's a great work. But I'll tell you, we've probably spent 2 full days planning and getting this going. And we also are looking at each other. And I don't like to whine, so that's not what I'm doing. But we're looking at each other saying, where's the capacity for this? Because this is a lot. Which is going to come out of this is conversations for me, I can tell you, around adding capacity, and definitely talking about the schools and class slides and art teachers and foreign language teachers and library, I mean, whatever it may be, and where our community guides us. But also to manage this, support this, is going to take administrative support. I can think about HR, the opportunity of how many staff that we might have the opportunity to hire next year. That's right now with our HR support. We're going to need some support there. So it's interesting how you put all that together. We definitely have a lot of conversations.
I know you've been good at this in the past, but I would like to see childcare and food at the. Yeah, it's probably already in the works. I just wanted to throw a pitch out for that.
It is, yes. So childcare, yeah, we've already booked some of the childcare for the dates that we're pretty firm on. The food will be snacks. We don't do a full meal at these, or we haven't in the past. If the board tells us different, but we typically have done some snacks, coffee, different beverages. But yes.
In regards to the survey, so other than the physical, you said it's an online link?
Yes.
So would that mean that anybody would be able to complete the survey, whether it's bots or agitators 6 states away deciding to mess with the results? Or are we taking steps to... Is there a way to make sure the folks we are actually targeting are the ones taking the survey?
Well, we're using SurveyMonkey, and Derek, I don't know if that. So, yeah, I'm a superintendent, not a technology guru. So, I will tell you that we've had that conversation. Not to be quite honest with this survey, with our previous surveys. How do we know? And in some of it, a lot of it, a handful of is trust. We go through the trust. We do know based on the numbers we got back, we have never been, oh my gosh, this number, how many? But in this survey specifically, it's not like we're asking for ID numbers or anything like that. So someone could just log onto our website and take the survey. That could happen. In the survey itself, there's a self-identification. We are asking, are you a parent? Are you a community member? Are you a student? Are you, in those fields, we'll have multiple, that yes, I'm a parent, and I'm a, whatever it may be. So there's some self-identification, but ultimately, I don't know if there's a specific, look at Derek.
Yeah, so we're not doing, excuse me, we're not doing a survey link as just like in the web page. If you go to, I don't know, some of the bills you pay or whatever, where something comes up and says, are you willing to take a survey? Ours isn't going to be a pop-up, but it is going to be something similar to that, so it won't just be an open link. It'll be, because we had that in mind. So how do we get that in front of folks? So if they go to the home page or they jump to, from Google to another page, the survey is there at the bottom. They can turn it off if they want. If they say, no, I don't want to take this, it goes away for that session. But that should help with the bot, but I can definitely check that. That has been something that the developer and I have been talking about, and that was a solution that they had of don't just put the link on there. Have it, do you want to take the survey? Yes, and then it takes you to the SurveyMonkey survey. So that's kind of where we're at with that, but I can definitely Yeah.
Other questions? No? Oh, wow. All right. Last two, promise. Student achievement, we have data that's been released. It is embargoed. It's officially, more data is being released, I believe, September 19th. It is still embargoed. It's not till, I think, the 17th of October or somewhere there where it's officially going to be released. So I'm just sharing with the board. I am interested in having a conversation with board leadership and ultimately the entire board about how you want that presented. I'm, again, very interested. We're running out of workshops and time, but I'm very interested in doing a presentation and a workshop to talk about student achievement rather than us standing here for 20 minutes and going through a report, a more interactive where we look at data together, ask questions, talk about data. So again, I need to talk to board leadership about that, but just so you know, that's something I'd like to recommend, and really it's been Derek's idea, thinking us standing and talk. Well, anyway, I'm not going to go into that, but just more interactive looking at data. So, and then lastly, celebration, fun, exciting invite. Candy Kelly put an invite at your table around our Native American Culture Night, Thursday, October 17th, 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. at the Fur Ridge campus. If any of you could make it, that'd be great. And sorry my report was so long, Andrea.
Don't apologize. This is great. We have the enrollment update now from Candy.
Yes, you do. Thank you. Not sure how to follow all of that, though. Woo. So at your spots, you should have an enrollment packet this evening, and that is up to date as of today. So what I'm going to do is go through some of this packet with you tonight, obviously not all of it, but as you know, we watch enrollment very, very closely all year long, but especially the first few weeks of school, so that we can possibly make some movement to balance out class sizes the best that we can. So I'm going to share some of those highlights and then some what I'll call challenges. And the first one being, I wish I had better news, and I don't want to be doom and gloom, but it's not the best news, and that is we are down in enrollment. As Ken alluded to earlier, if you go to the bottom of the very top page, you're going to see that we are currently down 301 students, or 3.1%, as of this time last year. So comparing the day, what day are we on? 7 or 8 today, to last year, we are down 3.1%. This, unfortunately, will probably grow. I don't know that it will get better, but it will probably grow because this includes just our enrollment at the high school right now. It doesn't show, so when we have our 10-day drop period, which will be, I believe, next Tuesday, any student who hasn't shown up at the high school, that will drop off of this number, and so it will grow. The decrease in enrollment will grow. Just as a reminder, this has been happening, sadly, since about 2015, actually, was one of the first years in our district, and many years where it just started declining. And last year we ended at about 3.5% declining enrollment. So we are sort of counting on this continuing, this trend over the next who knows how many years, but something that's interesting and what we do every year is that we ask our records secretaries, where are you getting records requests from? So because that's how it works. When someone moves, they send us a records request. So I thought I would just share that with you. So one of the top, so it's 20% of our kiddos that are leaving us, our families, they're actually going out of state. So that's kind of interesting. That's the top, that's the biggest group. Next to that is what we're calling other, and that's just a smattering of districts around our state. It could be the onesies and twosies around the state. That's the next biggest group. And then from there it goes Portland Public, online private, North Clackamas, Reynolds, Centennial, Gresham, and then the smallest group that's leaving us is going to Park Rose. That's kind of the order. who is coming our way is also interesting, because 23% of our new families are coming from Portland Public. That's our top group. And then from there, out of state. So, and then again, I go down to other online, private, Reynolds, Centennial, and so on. So it's just kind of interesting information that our out of state is the highest going out and our second highest coming in. And just something that we're always interested in finding out about. If you turn to the next page, and it's the one where you're going to see, it's the comparison by school. And you're going to see a lot of red there, unfortunately. All the red is the schools that went down in enrollment. And so you can see some of our biggest drops in enrollment are at Gilbert Heights and Gilbert Park. And then we have 3 schools that have increased enrollment. So Cherry Park is one, Menlo Park is another, and then Ron Russell Middle School. Those are the 3 that have had actually increased enrollment as opposed to our other schools. On the next page, this is the class size for elementary, and I mentioned earlier that we do our very best to watch this so closely over the first few weeks of school, because we always say that our students and families, they never come in nice, neat little packages. What we end the year on and begin the year on are 2 very, very different things. You wouldn't think that it would be, but especially this year, it's felt like it's been 2 very different things. So when we had classes organized and ready to go over the summer, we were counting on that what we ended with was going to be similar to what we would start with. Well, that doesn't happen. And we know that. It's not a surprise. Some years are tougher than others. And for kindergarten, we never really know what's going to come our way. We can trend it. We in schools do that. And even then, sometimes it's just you just get surprised. So we had some what we'll call hotspots at elementary this year, this fall, and we already made a few changes, and there's a few yet to come. So a couple of changes that we've made is we did reduce a kinder classroom at Gilbert Heights. They had 4 to begin with, but those were in the teens, and that just is tough. I mean, as much as we would love to keep that, because one of the highlights is if you look at our class sizes on this page here, we have some really, really nice class sizes that we would love to keep. And for the most part, we are keeping those nice class sizes. However, Gilbert Heights, because there was a need at another school, which was Ventura Park, we did reduce, we compressed, I'll call it, 4 classes into 3, and then moved that teacher or that FTE over to Ventura Park, where they had a burst of kindergartners, and they had 36 and 37 in their beginning of year classes there. So now Ventura has, as you can see, has been able to lower their class sizes by creating a K-1 blend. Another area that we were lucky, fortunate enough to handle internally through the leadership of Susan Olds, the principal at West Palhurst, is you can see her first grade classes are quite small, again in the teens, where her kinders were a lot higher, again not knowing that we would get that many. So she, and actually in collaboration with her staff, because the teachers have been phenomenal about this, they're going to go ahead and do a K-1. So even though you see some red there as high, that will change over the course of the next couple of weeks. All of those things take time. It's really difficult. Those are some really difficult decisions. It impacts not only the students and the families, and having to move around who you thought was your teacher to begin with, and then you're going to end up having a different teacher. And so all of that just takes some really what I'll call sensitivity on our part, and time, and collaboration and communication with the families. So that takes some time. And then also it's impactful to the staff members as well. So that's been a change. And then I want you to also notice at Mill Park, We have some high sizes at kinder and first, and we are addressing that too. That is in progress right now. In fact, we're going to be making some, I would say, more solid decision around that. But I can tell you that Bob Sell, the principal, is starting the interview process for that, what I'll call fix. So that's kind of the highlights of the class size averages across our elementary buildings. Please know too, in the past we have bused students, and a lot of times what we've done there is we've just asked families, would you be willing to have your child be bused to another school that does have lower class sizes, just at I'm talking elementary. And sometimes parents take us up, families take us up on that, but not often. And so we're trying to avoid that because we just feel like it would be best to try to fix things within the building, but also we can't add to our budget either. So it's a really integral process to doing our best to balance things out. The other thing, I won't go on much more other than you can see the enrollment, the daily enrollment at the middle schools toward the end. The blue sheets, it starts with elementary, and that goes teacher by teacher, so you can see what numbers each of the teachers have in elementary. And then if you go to the end, you have the middle schools, Alisat and Floyd Light and Ron Russell, and it shows that the 6th grade classes, which are a little bit higher than elementary, but still really pretty good sizes. And then just the enrollment at 7th and 8th at each of those schools. And then, of course, at the high school, the number you see there is just their actual enrollment. That's not necessarily seats in or bodies in seats, and we will know that come this upcoming Tuesday. So I think with that, just I'll reiterate we're down. And it more than likely will go down even more in enrollment after next Tuesday. And I know that Ken wants to say something like that.
Well, I just want to add one thing, Candy, would get to. We also, one of the other solutions or support we provide is IA support. So when we are over our targets or when you see those red, if we can't get an FTE there through some sort of transfer, then we do allocate more IA hours to those classrooms as support as well. So just follow up. And I'll just say it a little different than Candy. Candy's saying that we, in all likelihood, our enrollment will go down throughout the year. It has the last number of years. It's been, I don't know how many years since we climbed from the beginning. So from the start of the year to the end of the year, students move out of our district. Based on the trends, there's no doubt in my mind that will happen this year. So we're in a pattern of downward enrollment. And this process itself is just different. Some of you have been at this table. When we show up and there's more students, then you can be talking about adding FTE, right? But we built a budget based on our current enrollment, and when that's lower than we thought, it's hard to actually add teachers. So that's what we're looking at. How do we shift? How do we modify? How do we get supports? How do we look at the budget? And is there any rock unturned where we can get a staff that's available? So I want to thank Candy. I know Andy was involved, and really all of our administrators, because that work and the teachers and the kids and the families, when you take a class and absorb that class, move an FTE different class, it's impactful. It's impactful to everyone involved. Anyway, thank you, Candy, and everyone else involved.
Thank you. Do folks have questions or comments? Go ahead.
So in the high school, when we have the 10-day drop day for students who just haven't shown up at all for the first 10 days of class, I'm assuming those are students that have had no records requests. We don't know that they've already gone someplace else. So this may be more of a question for Ken or Candy, or I don't know who, but who's checking up on those students that are 10-day drops with no records requests to transfer to another school?
Right.
So just to be clear, so everyone knows that 10-day drop is part of law. I think Christine knows that, but so everyone else knows that. If a student does not show up at our school after 2 days, by law, we have to withdraw them because we can't continue to claim them or get funds from them. So that's number one. Second is, could probably have our board secretary talk about it, because it's ultimately what we do is try to go through the follow-up with the registrar's office around everything from personal calls, checking in. Many of the students, there's no contact when it's a 10-day drop, but there are times that we do end up connecting with them and find out they went somewhere where there wasn't a record request, and we chase that down, but unfortunately not always.
Because that sounds like a nice little leak of data for our graduation rate.
That's exactly what, well, it's more than that. It's what's important for the student and trying to make sure they're in school, and can we help them get in school. But absolutely, that follow through, anytime a student should be in our school and they're not in our school, where are they at? How do we help them? How do we connect with them? And every little student, whether we get them back in our school, get them connected to another school, get them to an outside program, alternative program, all of those are wins.
Yep.
I had a quick question. I was actually just in Canada visiting my sister's family, and her third grader the class was too big, so they did a third grade, fourth grade blend, but only told the 8-year-olds about it. I just wanted to confirm and make sure that parents become aware when there's a blend, correct?
Yes. In fact, and I would say even Andy, he's been really working with Susan Olds, but we asked, and she wanted to, this is what we typically do, where she makes a personal phone call to all of the families that we move. We have heard of horror stories in other districts where you just get a letter, and it's that is not how we would want our families to find out. I think what Ken said, it's just not that I would complain either. It's not a fun part of the job. It's not something that we enjoy doing. It's really sensitive, and we recognize that and make sure that we try to do it in the very best way that we can. So,
Stephanie, did you have anything?
Yeah, just considering that we kept our contingency low this year in the budget process and the enrollment being down, like at what point should we be really concerned about staff cuts as opposed to just attrition? Or
Yeah, so that's a great question, and ultimately two things to remember here. Number one, what Candy's telling you is year over year. So today's enrollment compared to last year's today's enrollment is down about 3%, a little over 3%. Reminder, we built our budget on the spring enrollment. So when we started, we know we went 3% down. So Pat she's not there, but does an amazing job. We did projections based on spring enrollment 1, and then we did subtract a little bit. So there's a difference between enrollment and ADM. So if it was truly 3% down from what we budgeted, I'd be having a different conversation with you right now. What I'm telling you is we have a pattern of enrollment going down, so each year we have to be proactive and make some difficult decisions around reductions, which we have under the board's leadership and guidance through the budget. If you remember last year, we eliminated 11 FTE out of the budget for elementary. That's hard, that's not easy. The good news, it was through attrition, but think about if we had those 11 FTE and the enrollment and what that class, we couldn't sustain it. So I think the biggest thing here is, one, the importance of how we connect with families, teachers want you to know, but two is the reality with this continuing to go, we will need to make decisions at the end of this year again about what is the appropriate level, where do we want class sizes. Here's the good news out of all this, or I'll call it good news, the Student Success Act we just talked about, one of those buckets, class size. So even with enrollment going down, we can set targets around class size and say now we have funding to truly sustain that class size, which is, again, we have to get input. Is that a value of our parents and families? But I think that's something that administrative staff will be talking about as well, that class size, there are some areas in class size that it does matter.
I wanted to back up for a second. You used the acronym IAs. Can you tell me what is that?
I'm sorry, Donna. It's instructional assistant, educational assistant, or instructional assistant.
Same as
it's a classified assistant.
Paraprofessional.
Yeah, paraprofessional.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, is there a standard in David Douglas of having a paraprofessional in all kindergarten classrooms, like some districts? Yeah. So the numbers on here where it says number of staff, that does not include though. So even though it only says, even where there's the red numbers and it says 3, that's there's more than 3 adults for that.
That means there's 3 sections of kindergarten, so
Right.
3 teachers in kindergarten, and every kindergarten teacher in our district has, or every kindergarten classroom, it's a teacher classroom, has a 6-hour IA or instructional assistant assigned to that classroom as well.
So when you say see 3, it really is 6 adults.
Right.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
what I wanted to
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yes.
I just personally, I feel like if I have 35-year-olds in a class versus 39-year-olds or 12-year-olds in a class, that the impact on the teacher and the instructional assistant is a lot more intensive. Or 6-year-olds if we're talking first grade. I wonder when we're talking about class distribution, like how much weight we should put on, like the difficulty, just managing younger kids would be versus like the educational value we're giving our older kids.
So, Erin, do you want to draw his attention to the top, Candy, and explain those numbers?
I will. So if you go to the third, the third page, if you can see at the top, it says maximum count. We call those our targets, and you'll see that they're very different in number, and it's exactly what you're saying. We recognize that having a large class at kinder is going to be a little bit different if the numbers, like if you have 26 at kinder and you have 26 at fifth, it's different. Or if you have higher numbers with the younger grades, it is a little more challenging. And so what these targets are is that when we hit that number, that's kind of what brings our attention to, okay, now when we start getting a couple of students past that number, that's where we start adding the parapro or the IA support at that time. So the thresholds are different for kinder at 26 than they are at 4th and 5th that are at 34.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Brita, did you have any questions? I had a couple. So, and maybe this is on a similar line to what Erin was asking. So, how do I explain this? I'm a little tired. So, basically what is happening is we have declining enrollment and simultaneously large class sizes. So for a couple of sections, right?
Couple.
So can you talk to me about the trend specifically of large class sizes? Are there more large class sizes than usual?
So what I would say is just the opposite. These class sizes are among the lowest that we've had in years. Last year, we also had similar class sizes, and ever since we've had that declining enrollment, we've talked about elementary class sizes being so nice. It's just wonderful to be able to have lower class sizes. I can tell you in having met with other HR directors just this week and some assistant superintendents and just knowing friends and whatnot, ours are probably among the lowest in the area. There are some pretty high class sizes out there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that is helpful to know. The other question that I had, though, in this kind of larger class size discussion, though, even though you said they're the lowest that we've had in years, of the large class sizes that we have, though, have you been able to see a trend? Like, for example, do we know consistently that there are larger class sizes in pre-K or 1 or first grade? Or, like, is there any indication of, like, a particular class or age group that is growing or decreasing?
Well, right.
Yeah.
There has been.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're looking at what is the largest group, you could go to that first page, and it's broken down by level at the bottom total. So really, I'm looking through here. If we're just talking K-5, the largest group right now, bubble, is you might say, would be 4th grade.
Yeah. So the actual case sections is not up. We have a couple schools with higher. When you only have 2 sections, that gets difficult. But I think what you're talking about is there isn't a trend, there isn't overall every year K's up, or in fact it's the opposite, K's down.
Yeah.
And first is down. If you look at our 5th and 4th and all the way through, and actually the other day in cabinet, Kelly pulled up a birth rate, and if you look at birth rate, it's down, and specifically for these incoming kindergartners and next year kindergarten. So the birth rate's down, which is part of our estimate projections that enrollment will continue. Now, the kinder number right now, 678. Next year might be at 660, right? So it's down, but we still might have an elementary school where we happen to have a couple families move in that increase, so that's a bubble that we have to try to get an FTE support to help.
There has been previous years where we looked at this and went, what is happening at first grade across the district? There's this huge bubble, and we're needing more teachers there, but it hasn't stayed consistent.
Okay, just curious. A couple other questions. So, and Ken, you had started talking about this earlier, and I think I just need one more round of explanation. So you were talking about with SSA potential for legislation around smaller class size, but then you're also mentioning that because our enrollment is decreasing, that it makes it tougher to hire. So I'm just trying to figure out those two things.
Yeah.
And how we are planning for our smaller class sizes and preserving that, and then making sure that we still have enough staff.
Yeah. So there's about 3 separate things there.
Okay.
But the very first one, when I talk about tougher to hire, what I was getting at is there are times, or there used to be times in this district, other districts, and we will be there again, where enrollment comes in high. And when enrollment comes in high in every grade, and we're at high levels and we're above projections, then we can go to the business office, or I can say, Pat, look at these projections. I'm going to the board because we have 300 extra kids at elementary, or even 100, and I can say we're going to hire a new elementary teacher, right? Or in fact, in the past, we've actually left FTE in the budget, elementary FTE that's just open, and we call those FTE in our hip pocket. So if something happens, we're there. Because of the last 2 years, enrollment declining, we haven't been able to afford just to hold an FTE in the budget, even though we didn't spend it, to hold that there when we're asking the board to reduce the contingency. We don't have that open FTE just sitting there. In times of growth, we typically project and say, we're going to hold 3 FTE, not higher, and when there's a bubble or something, we know we have 3 FTE, we can move quickly, and or if it's above that, we can come to the board and say, board, here's the FTE you approved, I need 2 more. This is why. Look at the enrollment. So when I was talking about declining enrollment, when we see these numbers, I'd love to tell you we're going to hire a new teacher at Mill Park. It doesn't exist in our budget, and it's very difficult, although we're trying because we need to do something. So instead what we do is we shift FTE. We collapse classes. We move a teacher's FTE or a teacher from here to there, which is a much more difficult process than going out and hiring a teacher, right? So that's what I meant by when you're declining enrollment, adding FTE when our budget's going down, there's a disconnect. Student Success Act, what I was talking about is, again, 5 to 8 million, let's say 8 million. We're going to get $8 million that we get to work with through a grant for next year. One of the 4 areas is class size. So we can invest in class size. So if that comes up as a priority, this group of our families, our communities, I would be expecting us to be looking at, hey, they said class size. This would be our recommendations where we set some floors and we set some ceilings. And now it's real hard. Even if our enrollment goes down, we have $8 million. $1 million of it's for class size. I mean, I'm just making this up. 100,000 is for class size. So we'll literally have budget to worst case. Maybe we can put some in our hip pocket and have open FTE. I'm hoping we can set targets, and we have IAs in every kindergarten class. What if we have IAs? I mean, again, I guess I shouldn't jump there. Exactly. Primary and general ed versus intermediate is their supports. And I want to say one thing. I apologize, Andre. I want to say one thing because we're talking numbers, and it's always hard because we're just talking numbers. And remember, and I know you know this. I'm saying this because I feel bad. every number is a student, and every one of these 3, 4, 5 numbers is a teacher. And so I want you to know, when I look at a 5th grade class of 31, we're not overlooking that. That's a lot of kids, and it's hard, but sometimes at this table we're talking budget, and we're talking how to make it work. And I know you all understand that. I just felt compelled to say it. So, but anyway, did that answer your question, Andrea?
It did. Thank you. And then I have one last question related to the green class size for elementary, the 3rd page. I'm looking at the pre-K numbers, the 32, 33, and 20, I guess, but predominantly the 32 and the 33 at Earl Boyles and Cherry Park, and they look really high. So I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about why those aren't red, or why those work for those classes.
Do you want me to, or do you want?
I could try to respond. I did notice that, and I thought it was very odd, and I circled it because I didn't notice it before. But those, I don't think we have classrooms that size, so I have to look into it, because those classrooms are actually capped.
If you look at the page for the school, you have an AM and a PM.
That's what I was going to suggest. I was
So-
just going to say.
Yeah.
There's one staff member, but
Yeah. So there's 6 sessions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks,
So
Pat.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was just, and that's why you look at Mill Park, and Mill Park is a full day program, whereas Cherry Park and Earl Boyles are AM and PM.
Part day.
So those are, yeah.
All right, I don't have any more questions. Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Because you mentioned that the enrollment overall has been declining for a few years, and the expectation that it will continue to do so. Is there a floor where you say, like, if it goes below this, then we start having different conversations? Like, I'm assuming that our neighboring districts of Centennial and Reynolds are in the same situation. Is there ever a point where you say, once it gets below this, then we're talking about, do we combine with other districts, or?
So to answer that question, could that happen? The conversation, could it happen? Yes, that'd be huge. The conversation of combining with another district would just be huge. But there have been limited conversation around that. Probably more specifically what you're talking about, Donna, which Portland felt. They went through a severe decline, and they're going the other way now, is my understanding. So first question, across the area, I have not been able to talk to every superintendent, but I can tell you those I did talk to are basically flat or down. And again, that's from the spring number. And that's really where we are from the spring number as well, kind of flat down, maybe 20-ish. So overall, I don't know where they fall overall, but so the same pattern. Now, with that said, the real, what you're alluding to and is real, is when does an elementary school get to a certain size that we can't sustain that? And again, a neighboring district being Portland went through that. They got to a point where they had to close schools, combine schools, develop different types of schools. And could that happen? It could. I mean, we'd probably have a pretty significant drop from here. I can't tell you it won't, but as a responsibility, you get to an elementary that only has 100 students, and you have a principal, and you have a full custodian, full counselor, and then you have a school of 500. Where do you, how do you, so that if we ever hit that, what that magic number is, we don't know.
There's no set.
Well, from history, I can tell you a little bit, because I closed 2 schools. Both North Powellhurst and Earl Boyles were closed, and we never did reopen North Powellhurst. And we were between 5,000 and 6,000 students at that time. And that was before a lot of construction was done. So it was prior in the 80s, early, before the 80s, late 70s and stuff. But I think it's also important for us to look to see how our free and reduced lunch count, is it going to continue to fall? Because that's where you see the displacement of your low-income people as a signal that our people are really being displaced out here in East Portland and stuff. And the city is really slow in moving on the issue. So, but I do have some good news on the preference policy our housing's been working on. Is I had rumblings that the Housing Bureau was going to say, no, you can't do it. I got an email that they want to meet with us on next steps. So I feel positive that we can, it might all in that conversation, because what we're talking it as a tool for anti-displacement. And so I feel a little more positive trying to work with Shannon in regard to moving that along a little bit. And she knows I'm not giving up, so.
Okay, any other questions on that? I think the last thing we have is the inter-district recap.
All right. Frida's telling me to go fast. I'll do my best.
And
All
sorry,
right.
we have a couple other items after that I added.
So also in front of you is a recap of our interdistrict transfer numbers. And as you know, every April we give a recommendation to the board in terms of our interdistrict process. And as you do every April, you did last April approved 150 students for release, and then 150 students that we could enroll in our district. And so when we, after that, we opened our process and it closed on August 1st. So what you're seeing right now is the status of our interdistrict transfer process as of last Friday. It's a changing number, and I'll explain that in a minute. So the amount of students that we have had come in are under, you can see students in continuing. We've had 63 that we had last year, and they moved out of our district, and they asked through the process if they could stay. So that's 63. Brand new, we've had 34 for a total of 97. So you can see that we still have about 53 spots to fill. But something I want to point out is that as the next number where it says interdistrict renewals, we had 52 students that we didn't have to renew again that were under our interdistrict transfer process last year. So that doesn't count as part of our 150, as well as the seniors, which we have 23. There's just an agreement between districts that we just accept seniors. We don't put them through that process. If they move, they should be able to stay so they don't lose credits or get into any issue to where it might jeopardize their graduation. So we really have a total of 172 students in. And then you can see students out, basically those that were continuing, they maybe moved into our district last year and they were able to stay in their district by law. Those wanted to stay in the district that they came from. So we have 76 there. Brand new, we have 74 from other districts, and we are at our capacity there at 150. There were 13 seniors from other districts that are not in that count. And then so far to this day, I've only denied one. I know I've shared this with the board in the past, but I try to give families what they're looking for. And the only way that I can do that by law is through a hardship clause. And so any that are outside of the interdistrict process, which is right now, it is closed, and any family that wants to either come in or leave, and mostly for the leaving part, because we are at 150, they would have to qualify for a hardship. So I have a personal conversation with all of them, and I try to guide them through that process and do our best to meet their needs. So at this point, we only have one out. You can see below, or denied, pardon me. You can see below where they're coming from and where they're going to, just as a recap. But again, these numbers are as of Friday. It changes. The numbers will change. We will get applications both in and out all year long, pretty much. It does slow down at a certain point, though.
One question.
Yes.
Portland Public being the hugest number of students out, are those still those families that are attracted to the immersion program, like Russian immersion and others?
So unfortunately and fortunately, part of the law is we cannot ask why they're wanting to leave. And so I really don't have an answer because we don't ask. And the ones that you see out, I have not had a personal conversation with, whereas last year our number was so much, we only allowed 50. I had a lot of conversations, and some of them, yes, they have several immersion programs that they're interested in, and that was a draw for sure.
Any other questions, comments? Thanks, Candy.
You're welcome.
So we had 2 other items that we added to the agenda. The first one is an other business item, approval of additional contracts. You should have that in front of you, and I think Lori also emailed it out before the meeting. This is an action item, so if anybody has any questions or comments, if not, is there a vote to approve?
So moved. Oh, sorry.
I would just, in the future, I'd like to get this stuff emailed out a little bit earlier. I didn't have time to even give it a brief glance today, so I mean, I'm okay with it, but just as a heads up.
That's actually our office because we just got some of this information like today, so that's why.
That's why.
Thanks, Pat.
That's why it's added last, because they get it really late.
I move approval.
I'll second.
Motion to, oh, sorry, discussion? Thanks. Nope. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, so moved. All right, then the last item is the purchase sale agreement. Ken or Pat, I don't know who wants to take the lead on that.
So before you have a purchase sale agreement for approximately a ½ acre, which is next to our Gilbert Heights property, for the purchase price of $320,000, and for your approval tonight.
Any comments or questions for Pat? Okay, is there a motion to approve purchase sale agreement?
I'll move approval of the purchase sale agreement for the property next door to Gilbert Heights.
Second.
You, second, discussion.
No, it's just very unusual to have an opportunity to buy property right next to one of our schools, so it's well worth taking advantage, especially if we want to put preschool there sometime.
Yes. All right. Yes, Jared.
Sorry.
You don't have to raise your hand.
I was wondering if I could make a few comments before.
Before we wrap up?
Yes.
Sure.
We have to vote.
Yes, we'll vote, and then.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. It give us, like 30 seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, it passes, and I'll give it to Jared.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I want to be very conscious of your time. One, I want to say thank you and a shout out to Miss O'Neill. For one, just for like the meeting and like defining things and acronyms and all that amazing stuff. I just want to say that real quick. Two, I do announcements in the high school, so I can incorporate the native land recognition into the announcements. So I would love to have that right now. Like if you could give that to me right now, and then maybe specifically the land that David Douglas High School is on, if we can have that. Third one is it's also Deaf Awareness Month this month, so I just thought I'd bring that up. Maybe look into some articles, educate yourself on like the culture if you don't know anything, or maybe learn the alphabet and be very like conscious of a community that often like gets neglected, even in social media posts, like to have like captions for things that you post or something of the like. Third thing is I just wanted to set an expectation that like if I say something in the beginning as a student body presentation and I'm not the most eloquent at what I say all the time, so if I do miscommunicate, you can always come up to me and we can have a conversation, so that way maybe I can explain myself better, or you can probe my thoughts and help me grow. Four, I would very much love to have physical documents so I could follow along with the meeting as well, because so far I only have this, and I've been using Miss O'Neill's documents the whole time. So I would very much appreciate, I would absolutely love that. And the last thing is I actually have like little knowledge of like how the board actually works, what's the processes, how school governance works, what each of your positions actually do, and the responsibilities. And I think that would be very important, not just for me, but for students at the school to have, and student council to have. So I would love to have maybe a meeting, like a one-on-one with one of you or a few of you to help me learn this process and like how all this works, so I can really understand what's going on and who to ask for what. Thank you.
Several years ago, what we did, a few board members met with Student Body Council, your leadership group, and just had a discussion about being board members and answered questions. So it might be something to set up in the future.
I'd love that.
Yeah.
So I don't speak for the board, although I know and can probably guarantee they'd love it, and I think they would. But I can guarantee I will be there any day, and half the cabinet will be there. We thrive on that. So if we could ever come present, have a conversation, let you know what we know about the process, we'd be happy to share.
And I just want to say thank you so much for staying the entirety of this meeting. This was quite a long one, and that's incredible. I'm like exhausted. I can't even really talk right now. So I really appreciate you taking time and being thoughtful about everything that you just said, but also your engagement in the proclamation. And previously, I'm emailing you the draft acknowledgement that we have right now. I don't have any other specifics on the previous tribes that inherited this particular land, but I am happy to connect you with Native American leaders in the community who likely would. Kelly might also have some background on the Native American Council, and we can talk about that. And then please continue to do like you did and let us know how we can be supportive of your learning here and of your leadership. So thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. I would just want to say thank you. And I do plan to stay longer for meetings regularly.
I just want to make a comment that you got your calendar this year. It is in partnership with the foundation and the district. The foundation funds it. The district helps put it together. And we're always looking for new ideas. We try to have a theme. Last year it was diversity. This year we have student art. But we're always looking for things. So if you have an idea on a theme, we've done just about everything we can think of. So
awesome. I totally forgot. I'm really tired. I have to close this out, right? So everybody's looking at me. I'm like, why? 10:08.
We have another meeting, though, right now.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks.